Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Really excited to bring today's episode to you. I've got one of my favorite guests. He's been on the channel. Actually, I think A's Philosophy has been on this channel as a guest speaker more than anybody, because we're now in a part 3 of a conversation that we're having on free will. Excuse me. Prior to this discussion we've been having on free will, this is a 3-parter. We had a discussion on Paul. That was a great conversation that A's and I had, talking about the conflicts between Paul and the gospel narratives in the New Testament. So this, I think, is going to be A's 4th appearance on the channel today. So really appreciate him making time out of his busy schedule. I see some people are popping up in the chat. Robin's here already. So good to see you, sister. Always a pleasure. Robin, I did actually give you a shout out last night. I was up. I was having a hard time sleeping. I got up to get a glass of water, and on my phone, I got a suggestion for a video to watch, or a live stream that was something, I think Dr. Greg or something like that. It seemed like a really nice guy. I only caught the last like 5 or 10 minutes of the show, of the stream, but I saw that you and Dux were both in there in the chat, and you must have left for something, because I said hello and you didn't say anything. So either you left or you're ignoring me. But I was really impressed with the energy from this Dr. Greg character, and he seemed like a really genuine human being. Seemed pretty intelligent, and I can't speak a lot about it because I only saw just a few minutes of his show, but I saw, since you and Dux were in there, I said, oh, what the hell, I'll go ahead and subscribe. And I left a comment saying, I went ahead and subbed to your channel because if Robin's here, it must be good, you know. And he read that out loud to the audience. It was so funny. He said, so Robin, you got a shout out from Dr. Greg last night. That was great. But at any rate, so just some housekeeping before I get into it with A's. Again, this is going to be part 3 of our discussion on free will versus determinism. And we'll get into that conversation directly here. But I want to just do one quick announcement. As always, we are promoting the Ark Encounter protest. That's going to be held in Kentucky and at the Ark Encounter itself. And so I think this is a really important event, which is why I'm actually putting a lot of effort into promoting this event this year. This is my first year trying to promote and sponsor the event, so I'm proud to be a part of that effort. Joe from the Kentucky Atheist channel is the one who's organizing the event. He's got a list of great speakers. I saw the other day that Austin is going to be one of the guest speakers, and he will be our guest here next Sunday. He's scheduled to be our guest. We're going to be talking about evolution. So last time we had a conversation about evolution on this channel, the open panel got pretty heated. So evolution is apparently still a pretty hot topic out there, and people debating about that back and forth. So Austin will be here. He sent me a series of slides. So hopefully I can make time this week to put together a PowerPoint presentation to go along with his oral presentation. So we'll have some visual aids. I was looking through the slides. I was really impressed. He's got a lot of great material that's going to supplement his discussion. So really looking forward to having Austin here next Sunday. And he will be one of the guest speakers at the Ark protest. And I think that's really appropriate because the Ark Encounter, the whole Answers in Genesis organization, is science deniers. You know, they deny evolution, they deny the global flood, or they think there was a global flood. They think the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and all this crazy nonsense that I just can't. I think it's harmful to teach children these things, in my opinion. So I'm glad to be sponsoring that. You can find a link to donate to the PayPal account to help support that event. It's in the description of this video. It'll be in the description of every video up until the protest happens. I do have a fundraiser event scheduled with Joe We don't have all the details of that yet, but I'm putting something together for, I think it's mid-June. Yeah, because the protest is in July. So I think we're scheduled to do something like mid-June to do a big fundraiser for that, to help them get over the hump with what they need financially. So some people have already used that link to donate. Bionic Latino, if he shows up today, I want to give him a shout out for his donation. Really appreciate the support to that event. It's really important. I see Doom is in the chat. Oh, there's Austin right there. Yeah, Austin, perfect timing. I was just talking about you. So yeah, looking forward to having you on the show next week to talk about evolution. For everybody who's wondering who I'm talking about, it's Scientific Origins. He's actually in the chat right now. So excuse me. So yeah, so that's, I think, pretty much it. We are well past 200 subs already. I picked up like 30 some, almost 40 subs. I actually picked up more than I picked up almost 50 subs this last month, but I lost about 6 or 7. It's really strange. It seems like if I don't put out any content, I add subs, and as soon as I do a video, I lose subs. So I must be doing something wrong. What I don't know how that whole thing actually works. But so I guess what I should do is stop making content altogether, and my channel will just grow organically, I guess. But without further ado, let me bring up our guest speaker today, A's Philosophy. If I can do this right. A's, I'd like you to go ahead and just take some time and introduce yourself to the audience, because you never know, this might be the first video anybody watches who's new to the channel. I know a lot of the people here might know who you are, but take as much time as you need. Introduce yourself and talk about your channel, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Well, yeah, first of all, let me thank you for inviting me. I always appreciate that, when people think my ideas are worthy of being discussed and they invite me on their forum to have them discussed. So I really do appreciate it. Yes, I go by A. I'm the A's Philosophy channel. Why I call myself that is just kind of what I went with at the beginning. And I rolled with it. I thought about changing my YouTube name several times, but I was just like, you know what? This is, basically just haven't done it yet. But anyways, yeah, the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I basically talk about there. Well, there are a number of things I talk about. Most of what I've talked about on my channel is actually Christian theology, because I think that philosophy actually plays a big part in how you interpret the scriptures and engage with them. And from an epistemological standpoint, I think epistemology affects how people approach whatever it is they're reading. So if our epistemology and philosophy are off, we won't approach the text properly, and thus we basically won't form our beliefs based on what's true, but rather, these contrived frameworks. And as you mentioned earlier, part of the problem is when people view the entire Bible as an inspired text, then they feel obligated to basically believe all of it and just hope that they interpret it properly, which they can't do unless they have proper philosophy. But as you said earlier, something I discovered in my investigation is that the Apostle Paul taught doctrines which were contrary to the teachings of Christ, and that was a big breakthrough for me. When I first realized that, I hadn't heard of basically anyone else who had come to that conclusion, but I've since realized that there are people who came to that conclusion. They were just kind of dismissed in history, and their ideas weren't taken seriously. But now, the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized that modern Christianity, like what you hear in evangelical churches, is mostly based on what Paul taught and not what Jesus taught, and I think that's a huge problem. So that's a lot of what I've discussed on my channel. Another problem, well, I've also discussed basically reasons to just believe in God. Why is God a rational belief as opposed to an irrational belief? And I know you mentioned evolution earlier. I think that something I discussed on my channel, and I am actually a creationist. No, I'm not a young Earth creationist, but I do believe, especially when it comes to biological origins, that creationism or intelligent design are more realistic options than naturalistic Darwinian processes. And I think that your conversation next week with Austin will probably be a very interesting one to me. But anyways, that's all. I'll leave it there for now. Yeah, this is the 4th time I've been on the channel. Wait, no, 1, 2. Yeah, this is yes, the 4th time. The first one, as you mentioned, the Paul discussion, and then 2 previous discussions on the topic of discussion today, free will. And after 2 conversations, the reason we're having third is because there's still a lot more to discuss. So hopefully this will be an interesting one, and I'm excited for it.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. I see, just really quick, I know I said we're going to get right into this, but I see there's several people here that have popped in, and I just want to really quick mention Simos Funk is in the chat. Robin, myself, and a few others in the community have been really trying to push to get him over 500 subs. I think last time I checked, he's right around like 490 or 490 something. So he's so close. So please, if anybody watches this video, I'll have a link to his channel in the description of this video. Do support the brother. He's a very intelligent, very polite interlocutor. He's willing to discuss a lot of topics. So if you're looking to debate somebody on philosophy or skepticism, you can talk to Simos, reach out to him. He also does, I believe it's some kind of race car driving. I don't remember which Grand Prix maybe or something like. I can't remember the details exactly, but he also does that as a hobby on his channel as well. So if you're into race car driving, check out Simos's channel. Philosophy to race car driving. That's pretty diverse. And then I see Khalid is in the chat. I was just getting ready to type a message to you, but I feel like I misspelled your name, so I'm a little bit self-conscious about that. So I'll just tell you, I really enjoyed the conversation I had with Khalid. He's a Muslim brother. Although I'm an agnostic, I'm not a religious person. I think all men are my brothers, all women are my sisters, and I really appreciate that Khalid and I had a really lovely discussion the other day. I think it was a week or so ago. I posted a copy of it on my channel. He picked the title and invited me to have a conversation on his channel. The title of that was, Is the West Lost and Dying? Very good conversation. And we're actually going to have part 2 of that discussion. This time I will be hosting because I was not able to do a dual stream. He does StreamYard or Restream, and I use StreamYard, and I wasn't able to figure out how to dual stream that discussion. So I just had to just play a copy of it on my channel. But this Wednesday, he's agreed to come to my house, and I'll be able to host the conversation. And so you'll be able to catch that discussion live. It'll be part 2 of that. And if you didn't see part 1, I highly recommend going and checking out that video. It was a great talk, very civil. We have different views fundamentally. Maybe people might refer to them as different worldviews, quote unquote, him being a Muslim and me being an agnostic. But we had a lot of common ground there. It's about mutual respect. And so I really appreciated that conversation, Khalid. Looking forward to part 2. Okay, so now let me get into this here. I apologize, Ace, for all the distraction. I'm trying to manage all this at once. So what I did last time is I wrote some notes based on our conversation. We had 2 discussions on this free will versus determinism topic already. Very good conversations, but Ace and I, and you'll see based on these notes here, we have some fundamental disagreements. And the interesting thing about this conversation, and one of the things that I enjoyed about it so much, is when you start talking about free will and determinism, automatically you start introducing a lot of other concepts that are really important that need to be fleshed out. So we talked about the mind-body problem. You see it right here. We talked about the hard problem of consciousness. What is consciousness? Let me move my mic here. Let's see if there's other things here. We talked about different studies that were being done. And I think what I'd like to do before let's go ahead and just go over these notes really quickly. So in fact, let me put this, give me 1 second here. I think there should be a banner that I have that put up these definite, here it is right here. Okay, so we had these definitions here. I'll go back to this. Okay, so we had free will. I had put up, this is from psychology, is that decisions can be made free of any external cause or influence. I think Ace at the beginning told me he wasn't really comfortable with that definition. So today I went with the dictionary definition. So Ace, let me run this by you. It says the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate, the ability to act at one's own discretion. Is that more comfortable wording for you when it comes to
I think it's a much better definition. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think it's actually saying the same thing. It's just worded differently because necessity or fate is ultimately what would be external cause or influence. But if you like that wording better, I'm fine with either one. Determinism. All decisions are made by external causes or influence. We could just flip that into all decisions are necessary, right? Let's see, compatibilism or soft determinism is while most decisions are heavily influenced by external causes or influence, there is still room for independent decision making. Now, are you okay with those definitions?
They say, what is that? What is that the definition of?
Compatibilism or soft determinism says that while most decisions are heavily influenced by external cause or influence, there is still room for independent decision making.
Okay, that could probably work. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
And
agree with that.
at the beginning of this conversation, way back in part one, I said that, I had just begun doing research into this topic. And I was pretty convinced at an early stage that free will, libertarian free will, as it's often called, just simply is incoherent. This just doesn't map onto the world that we see. However, I wasn't sure if I was at hard determinism or at compatibilism. And after two parts of this conversation and taking time in between our conversation with A's to do a lot more research into this, I think my official position is really landing at compatibilism or soft determinism. I do think that there are, it's unquestionable, in my opinion, that a lot of our decision making is happening without any conscious, active decision making. It's happening in the subconscious. We also have what they call autonomic body functions that are happening without any conscious mind being directed towards it, saying, okay, I feel like I'm going to digest my food right now, for example. Now, all those processes, breathing, I don't think about breathing. These things just happen because the body is how the body functions. And it does require an active brain to a certain degree. But even, well, I won't get into that. So there are a number of examples we could look at to say, well, there are certain things happening that we lose our composure, for example, right? We lose control. It's called red. I see red, right? Two guys get into a fight because they just see red. They're not thinking, oh, I want to do this or do that. Their emotions take over. So I think that we could say, yeah, there's definitely external causes that are affecting decisions. However, I do think that, Mark Reed came on as a guest on a different discussion we had, and he really summed it up very well. Mark Reed is a very smart guy. For those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, definitely check out his channel. It's Mark Reed Atheism, I think is what he calls it. I'll put a link to that in the description. But he said that because we have the ability to second guess ourselves, to reason through decisions at times when we actually take the time to do it, this tells us that there is some active decision making that hard determinism doesn't necessarily seem to account for. And I agree with what Mark said there. So I think that soft determinism or compatibilism is really the most reasonable position to fall on in this. As you started out as a libertarian free will advocate, have you changed your position at all? Has it moved the needle even slightly any direction from that position for you? Or are you still firmly planted where you are without any doubts or questions whatsoever?
Well, yeah, I would still hold to what would probably, generally be described as a libertarian free will position. Yeah, I mean, people can accuse me of being closed-minded, but during the course of as I've thought about it, I just see myself as being more correct and more solidified in the position I held originally. So, yeah, that's kind of where I am on that.
No, that's no problem at all. And I'm not here to judge. And I think the A's knows me already. We have a really great relationship. A's and I have had some really good back and forth on my channel and also on his channel. I've been on his channel a number of times, which, by the way, give a big shout out to A's because he is one of the theists out there who's willing to engage with people who he knows are gonna disagree with him. He's not looking to be in an echo chamber. He invites people all the time to his open panels, open discussions. I really respect that about A's. And I've been on his channel a number of times, and we've always had great conversations. So I'm not here to judge A's on his views. I'm just here to give the audience really a chance to hear two different perspectives, because we are coming from two different worldviews, as they say, and we definitely have two different positions on this topic. So let's go ahead and just go over some of the notes that I took from our first two videos. And then A's, if you have any thoughts or comments that come up as I'm going through these, interject. You don't, cut me off, whatever, just jump right in there. Okay.
All right.
So mind body, this is one of the things that came up during this. Let me hide this note here that came up during our discussion. I think this actually came up almost immediately in part one of this discussion. And A's was saying that thoughts start in the mind and that the body does what the mind tells it to do. These are A's perspectives here that I'm just going over. Um, he said, I believe we came to the conclusion that if this is even possible, that, or well, I'll just say the A's was saying that the mind is unconscious, but acts as a mechanism to initiate thought. Am I right so far on that, A's? That's still your position on those three?
Um, I was a little bit iffy on whether the mind itself possesses consciousness, but I will, or whether consciousness is a third aspect of the total being and the mind functions more as like the initiative aspect of the physical being. Now I have to say I think it's possible that the mind actually is something that would be described as physical, but just physical from a perspective that we can't detect with our current scientific technology. Something akin to maybe energy that we can't detect with our current scientific tools, and maybe consciousness is what perceives what is going on in the mind and in the body. But I think that for simplicity's sake, that's kind of like almost semantics. We could say the mind is conscious. The reason I think that there needs to be a distinction between consciousness and mind is because there are some other questions that arise kind of deeper into the discussion about the mind body consciousness connection. But it's too sophisticated. It's not too sophisticated. It's too complex to have in a conversation. So I think for the purpose of the conversation, we can just say that the mind is conscious. It is the one of its functions is consciousness.
And we had, you kind of referenced that here. I just want to highlight that. So that's one of the things you said is, because I asked you, I says, can we look at this mind? Can we test this mind? Can we observe it? And you said that mind is made of an undetectable material similar to dark matter. So it's just like we can't detect dark matter. We look at phenomenon that are happening, and so we say, okay, well, that seems like a good explanation for that. We're going to call it dark matter, right? That's in cosmology.
Exactly. So I think that dark matter is something that is more recent development in science. And when I say more recent, I think within the last couple of decades, the idea of dark matter has really kind of taken hold based on observations of how the universe operates and functions when we look out into space and we see these celestial bodies in these galaxies and the stars orbiting around in these galaxies. They're basically behaving in ways that indicate that there's a great deal more mass there in the universe than we can apparently detect with our technology. So scientists have surmised that there must be some sort of substance out there which is undetectable, but is nevertheless there and is exerting an influence on the matter around it. Now, what this substance or matter is and what it's composed of, it's hard to really say, which is why it's just given this nebulous term, dark matter. We don't really know what it is, but the observations indicate that it must be there to some extent. And I think the mind probably could fit within that category of it's clearly there and it's clearly exerting an influence, but what it's made of and what its exact nature are open questions. And I'm free to admit that some of these questions just can't be answered right now based on our current level of understanding and scientific development. But they might be at some point, and that would be very interesting to know the answer to these questions. But I just think that logically, the implication is they are there. It's just a matter of figuring out what exactly it is.
Just want to give so that's from A's perspective on mind. I would say from the naturalist perspective, which I'm not a strict materialist. I'm actually, I guess the term would probably be like transcendental naturalist. I don't like all these labels, to be honest with you, because once you start putting on a label, you kind of paint yourself into a corner. And I don't always necessarily ascribe to every part of a particular philosophy or theory. I just take bits and pieces from what I think works the best. So, it's tough. Even agnostic, I'm agnostic about the gods in philosophy because those are the gods that I take seriously. But I'm actually not agnostic about all the anthropomorphized gods, the gods of organized religions, because I just don't take those gods even seriously. But I definitely take the concept of like a prime mover or a necessary being, consciousness being fundamental. Those are arguments that I don't take an atheistic or a solid position on, because I don't think that we have enough information to make a determination one way or the other. But so these labels, they get really tough when I say agnostic. Does that encompass every single religion and every single God? It's Zeus and Apollo and the Jesus God and all the gods out there, right? No, not necessarily. So that's why these labels get really sticky. So when I say transcendental naturalist, ultimately I believe that while I do believe in metaphysically, which is to say at the ultimate root of reality, for those people who might be unfamiliar with what metaphysics deals with, I do believe there are some things that are transcendental. My personal view is that mathematics and the laws of logic are metaphysically necessary. They create a bridge, a necessary a priori bridge between what we call subjective human consciousness and objective reality. So, we can't, there's no material numbers out there. I don't believe in a Platonic realm of forms per se, but I do think that there's something transcendental between mathematics and the material world. So I'm not a physicalist, but I am a naturalist. I think everything ultimately has a natural explanation to it. But let's look at this, what Deconverted Man had left some comments in part 2 of our free will discussion. And I really appreciate Deconverted Man for taking time to leave comments on the videos, because it helps, I guess, the algorithm apparently and stuff like that. But it also gives a lot of great information that maybe should be highlighted. So I'm just going to read something he put here from AI. Mind, brief definition. In neuroscience and cognitive science, the mind is usually understood as the set of processes produced by a nervous system that involve representation of information about the world or body, integration of that information, flexible control of behavior based on goals, memory, or prediction. These processes arise from activity in neural networks, especially large interacting systems of neurons. This is a functional definition, not a mystical or non-physical one. The mind is what the brain does. So that would be the opposite view for the mind between A's and myself. A's, you said the mind is the man behind the scene. Do you want to expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah. So first of all, that particular view, you're actually, believe it or not, the reason it's necessary to talk about the mind body problem is because your perspective on that question will actually, in many ways, determine what viewpoint on free will is even possible. If your belief, remember, if you go back to the first conversation we had about this, and we were trying to flesh out what isn't exactly a definition of free will. Something I said, for free will to even be possible, you basically have to, at a moment in time, be able to realize or actualize multiple potential futures. So picture let's go to the choice A or choice B. You're waking up in the morning and you're trying to choose breakfast, apple or orange. Now, for free will to even be possible, the future at the moment of the decision must be indeterminate. Okay, so you actually at the moment have to have the actual real ability philosophically to be able to choose between the apple and the orange. If your view of the mind is that the mind is what the brain does, then what you've reduced the situation down to is a physically deterministic scenario where free will becomes logically impossible. So the viewpoint of the mind as a purely a product of neurochemistry logically eliminates the potential for free will to be a real thing. So people really have to think about how they view the mind and the brain and how that whole system operates before they come to the question of free will. Because if you settle on the idea that the mind, basically mind equals brain, then free will is logically impossible and you must be a determinist. So I will say that, yeah. And so in my view, because I believe in free will, logically, I must reject the position that the mind is purely a product of brain chemistry. And now it's not, but here's the thing. I think that there are very good reasons to do that. And I think logically, for rational thinking to even exist at all, you cannot adopt the position that the mind equals brain chemistry. If that is true, then everything we're doing is just purely a result of atoms determining things. Nothing we do is a result of our own volition. Nothing we do is a result of our own actual thinking process. It's all the result of chemical necessities and what those chemical interactions will necessarily produce as a mind. Now, the mind, I'll just finish with this. The mind is what's going on behind the scenes controlling our body. It is the initiator of everything we do. The formula isn't brain activity produces mind or brain activity equals mind. It's actually mind produces brain activity. That's the correct order philosophically, if you want to believe in free will and the capacity for rational thought. So I'll just stop it there and see if we can kind of flesh that out. I don't know if you had any questions about what I just said.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting statement that if there's no mind independent of the body, then determinism is the only solution. That is interesting. That might actually take I don't know if you want to do this or not. Maybe I'll talk to you offline about whether or not you want to play devil's advocate with me about that, because I don't want to take this whole show up to get into that. But I think I don't necessarily know that if we take the mind away, I agree with you 100% that taking away this concept of this mind, this independent mind, definitely hurts the free will argument. But I don't think it forces us to make a decision between compatibilism or hard determinism. But it seems like that's what you're saying, is it with no mind, no independent mind independent of the body, then compatibilism is impossible even. Is that your position? It has to be.
It is.
Okay. Yeah, that would be an interesting conversation for us to have at some point. Maybe we will talk about a part 4, because that could just be fun. I don't know how much energy you want to spend arguing for a position because you don't even believe in, but I'd like to hear how you came to that. But I do want to kind of keep this moving forward. So maybe we'll put a pin in that, and if we have time later or in the open panel, we can get into that. One of the differences here we mentioned, and I don't know if I wrote a note about this. Oh yeah, I did right here. You made the I don't want to say assertion or claim, but it seemed to me you commented that cells have minds, right? That like bacteria, at some point, the bacteria goes for the food source because it has a mind directing it. Is that still essentially your position?
Well, it appears that I've even seen some scientists indicate that even molecules, to some extent, have minds, and I've actually covered that topic on my channel. I'm not going to go into it, but
Okay.
certainly, what I'll say is that it does appear that single-celled organisms have the ability to make choices, and therefore, in my view, that means they have some sort of rudimentary mind. How that works, I have no idea. But that would obviously be the necessary logical conclusion of that.
The comment that Deconverted Man left when AI asked this question, about the mind body problem, so on and so forth, and just whether or not cells have a mind. It said that no, individual cells do not have a mind in the scientific sense. Cells can sense chemical signals, respond to stimuli, regulate internal states, and communicate with other cells, which is quite impressive if you think about that just at face value. But so examples of this would be like immune cells chasing pathogens or bacteria moving towards nutrients. But these are biochemical regulatory systems, not minds. So a key difference is information integration and representation. Minds require complex networks that can combine many signals and produce flexible behavior, which in animals is done by nervous systems. And a single cell lacks large-scale information integration, symbolic representation, memory systems comparable to brains, and predictive modeling. So while cells show adaptive behavior, calling that a mind would be a category expansion rather than the standard scientific usage. So in short, mind equals information processing and behavioral control produced by a nervous system, and cells equal responsive biochemical systems, but not minds. So there's a scientific definition versus the the philosophical definition, I guess, if you will, that A's is proposing here. And I think the issue that we're running into, for me personally, is that your argument is going to run into what's known as the mind-body problem. It's called Cartesian dualism, is where we get that from. Descartes proposed that there is an independent mind, right? A mind independent of the body, and that he said that the mind, just like A's is saying, kind of controls the body. But it runs into, in philosophy, it's been exposed that Cartesian dualism runs into what's known as the mind-body problem. How does the mind actually affect the physical brain? If the physical brain in and of itself doesn't have the capacity to produce actions, to produce, that's probably not the right word. I guess that would be produce the actions to get the body to do things. It requires the mind. And people say, well, how does this body, how do these physical elements lead to conscious thoughts, right? So that becomes the hard problem of consciousness. The reverse of that then is, if there's this mind out there, how does it connect to the body and cause it in the reverse? Seems like we don't have any really good answers for that, at least not in psychology or in neuroscience or any of the hard sciences at all. One of the other notes I wrote here is essence. We never. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think we have multiple points on the table that need to be discussed. So first of all, you went to the AI basically write up about how bacteria don't have minds, which I would love to respond to that. And then
anything at all. I'm just basically giving the audience the two different perspectives. You've got your perspective, and I've got the perspective from science, and I'm letting them kind of make their own determinations. But feel free to interject or add anything or comment on anything at all.
Yeah, well, when you talk about science, what you're really talking about is the opinion of scientists and the current working pair. And when you're talking about also AI is probably going to be, it has its sources where from which it's generating its answers. And it's usually going to be so-called quote unquote authoritative scientific, academic sources, which is, I would argue, mostly controlled by people who are philosophically naturalists and kind of basically committed to a materialist worldview paradigm. So it's obviously going to spew out an answer that's based on that philosophical viewpoint. I would argue that viewpoint makes no sense whatsoever and can't explain what's being observed. It's a philosophical commitment that flies in the face of direct observation. And I really do think that my view is the scientific one. It's the one that's actually based on scientific observations and the necessary logical conclusions of what we're observing. Whereas these so-called scientists out there, are committing themselves to methodological naturalism, physicalism, whatever you want to call it, and developing their viewpoint on free will and the existence of the mind based on that, as opposed to what I would say is the necessity of what's being observed. Like, the idea that we have the ability to choose is a raw observation. Now, if people want to argue that it's all chemicals, creating a chemical necessity of making us feel like we have the illusion of choice, well, that's not what the evidence is showing. The evidence is clearly showing that humans are making choices and thinking rationally. But they want to deny that. So I'll just put that on the table. And what was the interaction problem is an interesting one. We can get into that too. But what I'll say is that anytime you have goal-oriented behavior, we are not talking about chemical necessity. Okay, even if it's the goal of let's talk about the bacteria going to a food source. Okay, the bacteria has a goal in mind. All right, atoms and molecules don't have goals on their own. All right. The atoms in a bacteria's body, or a human or whatever, let's just stick with the bacteria though. The atoms in a bacteria's body don't care if it gets food. They don't care if it gets energy. All right. And if you want to add more atoms to the system, it doesn't change the scenario. A bunch of atoms in the shape of a brain or organism's system, they still none of it cares. So for it to care about even getting food, there has to be some independent agent that is directing the physical assemblage towards that goal. Okay. Otherwise, even if a bunch of molecules just happens to form into the shape of a bacteria at some point in history, it's not going to do anything that's going to cause it to reproduce and do things that will ensure its survival unless it has a mind directing it to do that. Otherwise, it'll just tumble around like a little rock or water flowing down a hill. It won't do anything that would exhibit some goal-oriented behavior. So anything that exhibits goal-oriented behavior must have, at some level, a mind. So I think that's just self-explanatory. It's not denying science. It's actually it's completely logical according to my view.
A lot to unpack there. I think that there's some fundamental issues I have with that statement. One of them would be you haven't solved the mind-body problem. There's no mechanism that you've given for how that actually works, and to call it scientific seems kind of like a big stretch. The other issue I have with that is you didn't use the word biases, but I think ultimately that's what the implication was. And if I'm phrasing or misphrasing, correct me, because I don't want to misrepresent you here, but it seemed like you're ultimately talking about the biases, the philosophical model that scientists have has to come from a purely naturalistic explanation or materialist. In the last discussion, I think you specifically said physicalist or physicalism. And I think you're probably right. Science, the scientific method is based on empirical evidence. That's how it functions. So it does require empirical testing, which requires a physical world exclusively. So there's that. I think that if the scientific method is of value, and I think it is, and I think that whether or not philosophically we like it or not, emotionally we like it or not, we function in the world trusting this scientific method. We trust the scientists when we go to the hospital. We trust the scientists when we turn on our cars, right? That's an explosive device, and we put the key in it. We send electricity and start combustion engines and so on and so forth. They're causing explosions. Got a fuel source there. It's a deadly machine. It weighs tons, sometimes several tons. We're driving down the road and trusting the brake system. All the sciences, the bridges we drive over, are based on this. Medicine, as I said before. So we trust science, even though we may not like it. Our actions show that we actually do trust it more than we might say. So I think that's kind of betrays that a little bit. And the guy said you haven't addressed or solved the mind-body problem. You did mention, as you have in the last two videos, about how the molecules don't have this goal, or it's this ability to seek out goals without some kind of mind, because the more molecules you combine, you're never going to get this ability to seek out a goal. But that specifically in science, they do measure this. They do define it as biochemical responses, right, to the environment itself. That's what these molecules are doing when they get combined to a certain state. When I talked to you about this before, I mentioned essence. So I said there's no car inside of a molecule of plastic or a molecule of metal, but you combine enough of these molecules together and you can get a car. There's no water inside of hydrogen. There's no water inside of oxygen, right, per se, but you combine these together and you get H2O, right? So you combine elements together and you get emergent properties. We do this all the time in physics, and we evidence this. We could observe it, we can test it, and we can repeat it, and we can make predictions based on that. So we know this is true. That would be my response to that. One of the things I think that was really interesting when I talk about the science, it's down here, the split brain patients. So we say that we have the ability to make decisions. And I think to a certain degree that's true, which is why I fall into the soft determinist side of this conversation, which is really, I guess, kind of in the middle, because it does seem like there are times when we are reasoning through choices. We second guess ourselves, as I mentioned in the opening there. Like I might have an initial response to something, and I might say, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to honk my horn and flip the guy off next to me because he's driving too slow, or whatever the case might be. I might rethink that Other times we react without thinking, right? So when we're reacting without thinking, it indicates that there is something happening in the subconscious that's guiding our behavior. I also think that I know you said that in one of the previous discussions that that digestive system is controlled by the brain, even though we don't realize it. And I don't
Mind.
know by the mind. I'm sorry. Yeah, and I think that if the mind is doing work, like you said, the man behind the curtain, kind of to phrase it loosely, um, how do you how do we know that? And it seems like the only way that you know that is simply by saying the opposite cannot be true. Is that ultimately what? Because, or is there another way to test that? Because I think we've gone around and around about there really is no way to test this mind, right? It's just you just the only evidence that or is an argument saying that physicalism doesn't provide an answer, so we have to assert a mind does it. Is what it
Yeah, well,
sounds like.
that's the way to think about it. Is this what is the logical limit of if we were to assume that everything is just basically physicalist, materialist systems producing, basically it's operating according to the laws of nature as we know them. What are the limits of that system? In my opinion, the limitation of that system is that goal-oriented behavior logically cannot exist within that framework. So we have to propose, at least at a theoretical level, something else to bridge the gap that exists between. We can't get to where we are with purely materialistic philosophy and scientific quote unquote scientific understandings. So what does that leave us with? It's kind of like some people would call it, well, the God of the gaps. They hear about the God of the gaps. You might call it the mind of the gaps, but at the same time, the gaps exist, so they have to be filled by something. The gaps exist between the explanatory power of materialism, physicalism, whatever you want to call it, methodological naturalism is sometimes you hear it called. The gaps exist. It simply cannot explain what we're observing, whereas a mind would. Now, there would be obviously questions about what is the nature of this mind, what is it made of, how does it operate, and we can talk about that. How does it interact with the body? I think that it's quite, I can provide a theoretical framework or model for how it would work. We wouldn't know that until we actually get the capacity to study it directly, but we could theorize that this is probably how it works, and I could propose a model if given the opportunity. But
Well, this is your opportunity. Give us a proposal on the mechanism itself as to how this mind controls the body, how the immaterial then controls the material.
well, I think that the best way to kind of think about it is probably with an analogy. Now, as we all know, analogies all break down at some point, so it's not going to be a perfect analogy because there aren't such things. But the way I would look at it as the when you think about first of all, we talk about energy. Energy exists on a spectrum. This isn't some new age woo woo. This is scientific fact that when we look at how energy operates, there are spectrums for how like basically energetic something is. Like we have the heat and cold is based on how fast quote unquote particles are moving. But even when you talk about light, like light energy, the different colors are based on the amplitude and the frequency of the light waves. I think what's going on here is the mind is probably a subtler form of energy of matter, and matter really is, when you look at it, it's basically energy. It's charged particles. Like the proton is the positive charge, the electron is the negative charge, and the neutron is just whatever it is, the neutral charge. But basically, matter, what atoms are, is basically charged particles, which we can define as energy. So I think that the mind is probably actually a form of subtle, what I would call subtle matter. Scientists might call it dark matter, and it's could be thought in another analogy. Part of this analogy is like the difference between water and liquid. Ice, water, and gas. Okay, so let's take like the physical substance would be like your body, the subtle influence would be the mind. Just like when you have water on a lake, you have the ripples. What's causing the ripples? Well, you can't see the wind blowing around on across the lake unless there's, smoke in it or something. But let's just say it's a windy day. You can't really see the wind, but it's having an impact on the water. And people can ask, well, why is the water doing this? Why is it rippling like this? Well, it's the wind. The same with the body. The body is being controlled in this instance by the subtle influence of the mind. And the mind is simply acting on a spectrum of energy where the physical body is also on that spectrum, just at a denser level. So this is kind of the model that I would propose. And really, at the end of the day, the mind is a physical substance, but it's just a physical substance that we haven't been able to detect yet. But remember, what is a physical substance? It is just energy. So these are the things that it's the science people don't understand, that when you talk about atoms, when you talk about physical material, at the end of the day, it is all just energy. This is not crank stuff. This is the particles, the atoms are made up of charged electric particles, and that is, at the end of the day, electricity, electrical activity, or energy, as I would call it. So that's a model I would propose to solve the interaction problem.
Well, I didn't hear a solution or a mechanism in that.
The mechanism is that the mind is a form of energy that directs the activity of the body. So your mind is. Well,
that's the conclusion. That's the conclusion you've got. So that's circular. Is there an independent mechanism?
Just like physical matter interacts with other physical matter in ways that can be observed, you have the energy of the mind interacting with the energy of the body in ways that are more difficult to detect, but would necessarily be taking place. And I think that at some point in our future, maybe we will be able to detect these interactions at a more direct level. Now we can't. But again, you talk about the scientific method, we should trust the science. Well, you have to realize, for a long period of human history, a lot of what currently is known by science was not possible to be observed, and therefore fell outside of the purview of science. But we've later determined that it's all true. Even when we're talking about light waves and particles and things like that, for a lot of human history, we simply didn't have the technology to study these things. Now we do. So you could go back 2,000 years and say, oh, the idea that light is this form of energy passing through space at a very high rate of speed, that's not scientific. Okay, yes, it's not scientific because our sciences are limited by what we're able to directly observe. But remember, we're not trying to determine what's scientific, we're trying to determine what's true. And what's true could very well lie beyond the current limitations of what is scientifically knowable. So I would say that.
Fair enough. I didn't. I think there's just a gap still there that's unanswered, in my opinion, unless I'm missing something in your analogy there. When you're talking about like the wind and stuff, we actually do. Smoke is a great example. We actually do say, well, initially the observation, the ripples are on the water. We have no idea what's going on. And then suddenly we realize that the leaves are all blowing in the same direction as the ripples on the water. And then somebody lights a fire and suddenly the smoke is, now we're starting to get this observation that can lead to testable and repeatable experiments. And then eventually we come up with the wind, the weather, and the ability to predict the weather now, and predict the wind currents and where they're going to be, and tsunamis and all these great things that all come from the scientific method. The split brain patients I mentioned do provide us with empirical studies that could show that decisions are made unconsciously, which would be in the subconscious mind, right? And they require brains to even happen in regards to these split brain patients, right? We take the brain out of a person, then they no longer function. So this gives us a delineation, a demarcation that we can say empirically, no brain, no function of X, Y. All we get are rudimentary functions in cells at that point, right? So on and so forth. And the cells will break down, and the cells, so the body will die, but the cells will break down. The laws of physics will continue. That was one of the other things that you mentioned that I found where I just couldn't get past. Where did I write that down? Yes, here it is. Animated organisms can violate the laws of physics. They can operate, move contrary to the laws of physics. And when you said that, it blew my mind because I've never heard any human being ever utter that the laws of physics can be violated. Even people, even when I talk to religious people who believe in miracles and supernatural things, I've never heard anyone say that it's a violation of the laws of physics, but rather it's a God that's out there that's working within the laws of physics to create a global flood or to part the Red Sea or whatever the hell the particular miracle, right? Raise Jesus from the dead. Who knows what the hell it is? But all using the known laws of physics because that governs the world that we live in, that we observe, that we could test, that we can measure. Anything else has to be simply hypothesized and argued for, right? If we can't test and measure it, and anything that can be tested and measured becomes empirical and it can be reduced down to the empirical sciences. So how did, with all this, like split brain patient studies, studying how, and I don't know if, I guess I should expand on that a little bit because not everybody watched the first two videos. So for those of you who don't know what the split brain patient study is, basically there is I can't remember the name of it exactly, but there's a material that connects the right half and the left half of the brain together, right? The brain works bilaterally with the body. So the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and vice versa, with the right side of the brain controlling the left side of the body. And it was initially done as a medical procedure to try and help a person out with seizures, right? Really bad seizures. And they cut this center material, whatever it's called, and in doing so to try and figure out where this, what the solution to these really bad seizures were. And what they accidentally discovered, and now it's become an entire science called split brain patient studies, is that the conscious mind, quote unquote, only functions in one half of the brain or the other half of the brain at a particular time. So a guy with a split brain had his right arm, for example, around his wife. And he's thinking about his wife, how much he loves his wife, and not thinking about, I want to do anything other than I got my arm around my wife. And his left arm was trying to strangle her, right? Unconsciously, without any, or subconsciously, I should say, without any actual will or free will behind it, just trying to strangle his own wife, who his right arm is around, who he's thinking in his mind, I love my wife. And yet he's trying to, his other arm from the split brain, once you detach that material in between, the brains are no longer communicating with each other, the two halves. And so we see this, that the brain subconsciously does in fact control the body. And we've done a number of tests and experiments to prove this over and over and over again, to where we can make predictions. Guy was thinking about something, doing something with one hand, and the other hand starts writing a note, just completely autonomously, just writing this note out, that he's not thinking about what he wants to write or any subject in particular, all happening in the subconscious. So it tells us that the brain, and when we put the brain together, then we do these same activities, except that they become focused. Now, when I'm typing on my computer, or I've got my arm around my wife or whatever, it's a focused activity. We also know, as I mentioned before, when we lose control, when our emotions through the limbic system into the frontal cortex, when we lose control of our emotions, we act without thinking, right? So certainly we know that the body does act without consciously saying, I have a will to this, I'm directing this, I have agency here, and I'm actually making this happen. The body is just acting out. Why is it acting out? Because the subconscious mind is working and based on its environment. It's responding to the environment. It's also responding, when I say responding to the environment, I'm not just talking about the environment that's in front of our face at that moment, but what we find is that in studying in psychology, and this is something we hadn't really gotten into a whole lot in our conversation, but I think that it would have been really appropriate to bring up psychology, because in psychology, they do a lot of studies in child rearing, right? How to bring up your children. And they've done so many studies to see that depending on the environment that the child is raised in, they are predisposed to particular behavior patterns. And we know this, which is why there's so much effort out there to get parents to do the right thing, to stop spanking your children, for example, to be more loving to your spouse in front of your children, so on and so forth. The type of environment that you have, provide them with the right food, the right nutrients, so that their body develops in a particular way. So all of these things affect the development of the personality of the child. So when they become an adult, they have a particular predisposition to a particular type of more productive, more civil, more emotionally balanced personality, so on and so forth. So because of all these different studies that I've mentioned, we can empirically say there are mechanisms to all these processes. these are evidence-based. We can empirically verify all this, and we can do experiments with this, which we have done, and we can produce results that we can now make predictions based off of. So I think that's what's lacking in this gap of the mind-body problem. Now, Cartesian Descartes thought it was from the pineal gland. He thought that's where the mind-body interaction happens. We've since, through science, realized that that's not true. So we have this massive gap with this mind-body issue for this Cartesian dualism that just hasn't been covered. And I don't think, you said there's a logical impossibility, but you never gave the P not P. Why is it logically impossible for the molecules to be formed in such a way that you have an emergent property that we refer to as consciousness? I never heard of P not P, but you said it's logically impossible. So I'm having a hard time granting any of what you've asserted here. I understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, and we're following along with the notes, and I'm just not seeing you connect the dots. There's a huge gap there, and I thought it was hilarious that you called it the mind gap or something like that instead of the God of the gaps. But I think it is a gap, whether you want to call it a God of the gaps or whatever, because you're not imposing a supernatural being here. You're just talking about the mind in and of itself. I think that is a mind gap, if you want to refer to it that way.
So obviously, again, there's so much that was just put on the table. It's going to be hard to address all of it. But let's go back to the first point you made, which was about my comment that making decisions violates the laws of physics. Okay, that does need a little bit of clarification. Whatever the laws of nature are, nothing can violate them. And I would argue not even God, because the laws of nature are a manifestation of the essence of God, or they are determined by God. So for God to violate the laws of nature would to be violate his own nature, his own decision making, which wouldn't make sense. So there's really no such thing as a miracle at the end of the day. It's just what appears as a miracle. But what I will say is that, yes, making decisions violates the laws of physics as they are currently conceived by the scientific community, which is in a strictly deterministic way. So how do we figure that out? Why do I say something so unquote absurd and just hard to difficult to accept? Basically the question is, when you think about this current scientific model of the laws of nature, everything must behave in a deterministic manner. Now, the logical implication of that is that there's only one possible future, and there always was only one possible course of events. Because if you've studied physics, you know that everything is based on the laws of nature, the laws of physics, whatever you want to call them. It's all based on mathematics. It's all calculable. You put something into the equation and it comes out on the other side, whatever it's going to be. The same thing applies to when, like, the laws of momentum, the electromagnetic forces, all of these things are purely deterministic. You can't get multiple futures, multiple potential pathways out of the current paradigm of how the laws of physics operate. But for these things like decision making and rational thinking and choices to exist, things can't be deterministic. Okay, that's the philosophy. So philosophically, we've arrived at a point, if people really are people, animals, organisms, whatever, if they really are making choices, which it appears they are, then at some level, the laws of physics as they're understood are being broken. And we have to figure out, it's hard to try to, but that is the purely rational, logical implication of what is being observed. And you have a limitation being imposed on the laws of physics by the scientific community, saying this is how the laws of physics operate. This is the logical conclusion of those laws of physics and how we are basically envisioning them. But then on the other hand, we have our observations. Well, it appears like things are making choices and they're able to go in one direction or another. They aren't set on a specific course that is determined long before the event actually occurs. Now, that's just for something to be able to make a goal-oriented decision, that has to be the case. Okay. So, do the laws of physics ever get violated? No, they don't. Do they get violated according to how science conceives them? Absolutely. So this current scientific paradigm is going to have to fall, and it has to be replaced with something that is more true, which is the system I'm proposing. My system is much more able to basically encapsulate what is being observed than the current scientific paradigm. Now, there are unanswered questions in my system, but the system as a whole, even at the theoretical level, much better explains what's being observed than the current scientific model of how the laws of nature operate. Okay, so that's how I would kind of reframe the whole comment that decisions violate the laws of physics. Now, you talk about emergent properties in the brain. The problem is consciousness. There's a big problem with that. Yes, according to the materialist framework, they have to have some explanation for consciousness and the mind, because clearly they do. And they go with this idea that, well, it's just an emergent property of the matter interacting with itself in the brain. There's a really huge problem with that. And they will admit this. If you listen to philosophers of science on this topic, what they will admit is that even though it's an emergent property of the brain, it's actually completely illusory, however you want to produce that word. And what that means is, what that necessarily entails is, because the mind, the consciousness, whatever you want to say, is an illusion, it has no causal ability. It has no ability to affect change in the world. So you can't have let's say, you have a little organism that wants to go to its food. Its brain is producing a thought that it's hungry and it wants to go. But here's the thing. The thought of being hungry itself has no ability to impact the direction the molecules in the body are going to take. Remember, the molecules in the body cannot be influenced by the mind. The mind is in that system, in the materialist system, in the emergent properties system. The molecules in the body are going to move according to whatever the laws of physics at that moment, the force vectors are telling it to do. If the force vectors are telling it to move in a different direction than the food source, that little organism's screwed. So let's say you have a 360-degree field and the food source is out in front of you. If the laws of physics are telling the molecules in the body of the organism to go the other way, okay, then what the organism's thinking isn't going to matter. It can't go in the direction of the food. When you think about a fish swimming upstream, its food source is upstream. It's swimming against the water. It has to be doing that in violation of the fact that the laws of physics, the motion of the elements, are determining that it goes the other way. Okay? This is the problem with the idea of just saying, well, the mind is an emergent property. Well, okay, but you still have a problem with explaining goal-oriented behavior in this model, because emergent properties can't influence the motion of matter. And since the body of an organism is made of matter, there's an explanatory gap there that needs to be filled with some other model that best, explains things, at least theoretically. All right, split brain patients. Split brain patients are another area where I can't believe that the materialists are claiming victory here. You will hear a lot of dualists talking about how the split brain problem has actually proved that the mind can't simply be a product of the brain, because if it is, then what's being observed can't make sense. If the brain is just a sort of chemical center where this impact produces this result, well, you have a visual field. So like you talked about. So part of what's going on in part of what's being observed in these split brain cases is that people are able to see things, but it's not being processed in their mind. Or it's basically like the guy who's having his arm around his wife. She's probably in his visual field, but because the two sides of the brain aren't communicating normally, the the visual experience isn't being recognized. That's actually a huge problem, because if it's all based on chemical interactions in physics, well, you have the light hitting the eye, traveling down the optic nerve, hitting the part of the brain that is supposed to generate the visual, conscious reaction to perception of these things. Well, that's not happening. Even though the eye is still transmitting things to the optical part of the brain, it's not registering in the mind. So some aspect of the mind is being short-circuited and failing to operate properly because of the disconnection of the corpus callosum, which is the center part of the brain. So I think these split brain patients actually prove that the mind is not simply relegated to just being a product of brain chemistry. Otherwise, the aspects of the brain producing these perceptions would just continue normally, and there would be these kind of strange phenomenon that we observe in these split brain cases. So I didn't do a great job of explaining why. I'm not, go ahead. I know I've talked for a while now, but
I don't want to. I want you to be able to, out of respect and just for the sake of the audience, I want you to be able to articulate your points as freely as possible. I know that you are generally on a time restraint, which I forgot to announce at the beginning of this. Normally, A's needs to do a hard stop, usually around 90 to 120 minutes. I can't remember if you told me today necessarily, but I know you have a busy schedule. So maybe for the sake, we should move up. There's a couple of things there. The optical network doesn't actually apply to the split brain patient's particular study I was talking about, because both hands are reacting to the wife. So the vision can't be relative to that. Her not being in his vision for the one hand versus the other hand, because one arm is around her, the other hand is trying to choke her out. So both arms are aware that the wife's presence. And I don't see the split brain patient is pointing towards dualism at all, and I don't think neuroscience does either. But I don't want to just keep going back and forth. We both kind of stated our case. I always try to find common ground with people as much as I can, because I feel like that's the best way to have conversations. And I do think, from what you said, I would definitely agree with you. And the reason I'm agnostic about a God is because I think that we may, because I believe in what's essentially, and I don't want to paint myself into a hard corner on this, but my overall general worldview is what they call transcendental naturalism. Okay, and I would encourage the audience when they're free time to look up transcendental naturalism, because it does allow for what we would consider to be transcendental phenomenon that affect the natural world, and it's all part of natural processes at the end of the day. So for me, the two transcendental phenomenon, if you will, that actually exist in reality would be mathematics and the laws of logic. Now, someone might push back on that and say, no, laws of logic and mathematics are simply the language that we created, which I agree is true, that just so happen to map perfectly onto the world. That's how we function. But it's all the language we create, and that's where it stops. That's the ontology of it is right there. I would say that epistemically we can go a step further and say that the real world actually maps onto mathematics, right? I would flip that on its head and go a step further and say that the real world maps onto the laws of logic, and I would look at them as metaphysical. But so that's where transcendental naturalism diverts from physicalism, right? So I do think that if we discovered a God, right, that it would not be a supernatural thing. I simply think I'm in agreement with A's that it would basically just be some kind of a incredible natural process or agent that we just haven't yet discovered, right? And so that's why I'm agnostic about something like that, I think. But I don't think even if we do discover this quote unquote God, it will be a supernatural thing. I do agree that it would ultimately, everything has to be natural. Okay. I know I have another theist, Darklight, who follows my channel, and he has his own theistic model, and he believes that that God and everything is actually nature, part of nature. So I definitely have some common ground there, even though we split off pretty quickly from that. The other thing is, well, I think I'll stop there. Where we are.
Go ahead.
I just
want to comment just a little bit. I don't want to explain but I believe it or not, I actually agree with the people who say that the laws of logic don't exist as actual realities, but they are just language we have. I do actually hold that view, so I disagree with you on that. I know you were trying to find common ground, but I don't know if you assumed I agree with your
No, no,
viewpoint there.
no. That's just my own assertion there. It's not
Okay.
my own. I mean, it's a whole field of philosophy called transcendental naturalism. But yeah,
Yeah, I actually I actually agree with the people who say that the laws of logic don't actually exist as sort of real entities or things at all, but they are basically just there is an external reality, and we use our minds to basically figure out what the rules of how this reality operates, and those are called the laws of logic. Okay, so it's not like the laws of logic transcend the idea that there just is a universe out there, and there's just that's and the universe would include the unseen aspects of our universe, but which I would call like the spiritual or mental realms. But um, yeah, so I'll just leave it there. I don't think we have to
yeah.
harp on
No,
that
I
too much
appreciate the
right now, though.
clarification. Yeah, it's just a matter of ontology. So do the laws of logic map onto the world, or does the world map onto the laws of logic? I guess is how basically that's really what it's getting down to. And I believe that it is the latter, not the former. But that's really kind of just an interesting philosophical discussion there. It literally provides no value to how we live our daily lives and stuff like that, right? It's not going to change the world or whatever. But so I think that reason and logic does give us, I wrote a note here for my own sake, that reason and logic is why I think that hard determinism fails. I know I've talked a lot about why I think that libertarian free will fails, but the reason I think that hard determinism fails is based on reason and logic. I think this is where we get our agency from, the ability to reason through things, to make logical conclusions, so on and so forth. And so I think that's very important. And I think that that's undeniable. I don't think we could really attribute reason and logic through just purely hard deterministic processes. I think that we actually do. Now, that's not to say they can't be explained through naturalism, but as far as just determinism itself, I think that there are times we do, like I said before, second guess ourselves and we talk ourselves off the ledge, is kind of how that's said colloquially. Oh my God, I can't talk. So I mentioned, I forgot to bring this up too, when we talked about studies, and so I talked about split brain patient studies and things of that nature, but there's other studies that I mentioned in one of the previous videos, just to touch on that again. There have been studies done, a lot of them, in social situations to try and test this determinism versus free will. And studies done on judges, for example, when they're sentencing criminals. It's been determined that if a criminal sees a judge right after he's had a good meal. So generally the best time to see the judge is after lunch, right after lunch, because statistically you have a much better chance of getting a lighter sentence. And it's because the chemicals that are working through the digestive system release serotonins and other things into the body that relax the body and cause the body to feel good. And that affects the judge's outcome on the decisions itself. So it's purely driven by chemicals processes. And then these are studies that have been tested, repeated over and over and over again, to where now we can make predictions that whoever gets to see judge right after he's had a good lunch is most likely to get the softest sentence. Whereas the guy who has to see the judge at the very end of the day is statistically likely to get, it's statistically probable that he will get the harshest sentence, right? Same thing with getting a loan at the bank. If you see your lender right after lunch, you're statistically more likely to get your loan approved. However, if you see the lender at the end of his day when he's trying to go home, you're statistically likely to get your loan denied. So this is because we can test these things and repeat these tests. It tells us that there's something that is driving these decisions other than free will, because it's inconceivable to think that this is just random, but it happens all the time consistently. That's a contradiction right there. There's the P, not P. Oh, it's random, but it happens consistently, right? So there must be something driving it, and we know that it's not free will. Combining molecules, we got the emergence subconscious free will defeater. I think the subconscious is.
I think it is free will. I mean, just because if I mean,
Now, which
you
one?
know,
Subconscious?
no, the idea, what you just you
Oh,
said we
about
know,
the judges.
yeah, the judge, we know it's
Okay.
not free will. What about what was said invalidates the idea that free will isn't being used by the judge just because he's hungry and he makes a different decision?
Yeah, because right, exactly. Or he's cranky. He's tired at the end of his day.
Yeah,
That's what
so people, based on their circumstances, may respond differently in different situations. But take, for instance, someone who goes on an extended fast. Okay, so when we're hungry, we search for food, right? But what if you put your mind to basically going on a fast? Some people fast many days in a row, several days. You hear these stories about people fasting for even multiple weeks sometimes. They're very hungry. Now, if it was all just chemical necessity and you doing what your body telling you to do, these people wouldn't be able to do that because they'd just be responding to the chemicals in their brain telling them to eat. So, but they've trained themselves to resist that so-called influence urge and use their free will. So, yes, it's not like that our will isn't impacted by what we're feeling, the chemical necessities of our body, but it's how we use it. It's a determining factor in what actually happens. So yes, there are always going to be contingencies and influences on how we use our free will, but ultimately, the thing is that the choice lies in our hands. If judges get hungry and they make a bad decision, okay, they've allowed the circumstances to improperly influence their free will, and they use their free will improperly. It's not, so I would just put it that way.
So this to me is why libertarian free will is impossible, because what you're doing is you're saying, yeah, you're calling it free will, or I should say what you're doing. What I'm hearing you say, I'm not trying to be so combative, so forgive me for that. What I think I'm hearing you say is that, yeah, we're making these free will decisions, but of course there's going to be necessity or constraint because of our environment or our hunger, so on and so forth, right? Well, that's actually not falling within the definition, because the definition says without that is what free will is, right? So that's
well,
why
you're never going to have you're never going to have a reality where there aren't circumstances.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. And that's what compatibilism says, is that, hey, yeah, this external environment does have predictable effects on what your decisions are going to be. Therefore, your decisions are not free. You can have a will and you can have logic and reason, but it's not free, right? And I'm not talking about violating the laws of physics, saying it's not free, because I feel like that's a straw man. I can't flap my arms and fly like a bird just because I will myself to. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is literally going, the decisions that we make are predetermined to a degree by our environment and by how we are raised and how our personality develops.
Well, hold on. I want to stop you there.
Uh-huh.
I want to interrupt for a second. You just used the word predetermined. That I would use the where if you go back and listen to where you said predetermined, I would simply say influence. They are influenced by.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I would say influence is fair enough too. It still works for my argument the same way.
Well, I don't know. I think that, yeah, the whole reason you have to make choices is because there are things that are influencing what you have to do. It doesn't validate the idea that free will choices are being made. It's just the set of circumstances that have arisen. That's why we have to make choices, because we live in an environment that is not static. It's very dynamic. It could be this situation or that situation. So we have to have the ability, unlike a rock or water flowing downhill, which can't respond to circumstances. It just does what it does. We have to be able to engage in goal-oriented behavior, and that's where free will comes in. And there's always going to be some contingency, something making us decide based on what's in our interests, to go this way or that way. So I don't think that contingencies and influences invalidate the idea of free will. They are why free will is necessary to survive.
Well, not by your definition, it wouldn't. And you're not the only one who has a different definition of this for free will. For example, I think, and I might be wrong, so do your own research on this, to the audience and to yourself, Steph, but I do believe Ayn Rand is a philosopher who she promotes objectivism, and her moral and ethical philosophy is, she does build around the concept of free will, but her definition of free will is the ability to use reason and logic to really dumb it down for people. So that's not how I'm using free will, and I don't think that fits either of the definitions, whether we look at philosophy or the dictionary. That's not in there. That's her definition. Your definition, if I heard you right, was and I think you've said this several times, so let me see if I can say it verbatim here, is goal-oriented behavior is free will. That seems to be your definition. So neither of these definitions that we've looked at here, agreed upon, actually fits your definition. It sounds like your definition is free will equals oops, that's a plus sign. Where do I find the equals? Oh, equals goal-oriented behavior, right? That's what free will is to you.
Goal-oriented behavior is a product of free will, but free will itself is the ability to choose between multiple competing outcomes.
Well, that's where logic and reason comes in, and I agree that we can do that, but I don't think that we do that most of the time free of constraint of necessity or fate. So let me give you an example of this. And I did want to give a chance to open up the panel to have the audience chime in on this. Yeah. And I don't know how, you're probably running short on time. I don't know. Do you have another half an hour?
Yeah, I have at least half an hour. I can probably stay until maybe a little bit later today, maybe up to 6:15-ish.
Okay. Probably. Oh, sweet. It's always such a pleasure to have you here because you're always willing to engage with people and you're always respectful. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me. It's always so nice to be able to talk to you. So let me now, where was I going to go with this? So I was going to ask you. Yeah. Okay. So culpability, right? If one of the issues that I have, and I think a lot of skeptics, atheists, and agnostics have when it comes to the philosophy of Christianity, for example, and in fact, all three of the Abrahamic religions, you get the concept of hell, right? Now, historically, I believe we could pretty much prove that this is, or at least safely assume or assert that this is an emergent concept, that First Temple Judaism didn't have hell. You don't see hell in the Bible until it develops much later, is a much later concept. And obviously, Islam takes that from Christianity or Second Temple Judaism as well. And you get that from Zoroastrianism. But that's neither here nor there. So let's just say that there's this supposedly this hell, right? The issue that skeptics have with the concept of hell is it's about coercion. You're not making a free will decision to worship this God. You are literally making the decision that you don't want to burn in eternity forever, right? That's coercion. So do you feel like coercion, if you're being coerced, like if somebody's holding, if hell, let's just use the example. If the threat of eternal damnation, eternal torture is on the table, and you say, okay, well, God, I'll go ahead and say I worship you and believe in you, or let's grant that we do believe that this is true, right? Then we say that the skeptic says, the reluctant would say, well, okay, I don't like your laws. I don't like the laws that are promoted, the bigotry that's promoted in the scriptures or whatever it might be. I don't like slavery laws or whatever that might be. I don't like the genocide and stuff you're commanding your people to do. I don't agree with that as a humanist, but I don't want to burn in hell forever. So I'm going to go ahead and worship you against my will. People can be held against their will without being physically restrained because you can simply point a gun at them, right? And tell them, don't move or I'll shoot you or whatever. And they will not move because of self-preservation. Do you think those are all free will choices they're making, irregardless of the fact that their life is on the line or the threat of eternal punishment is on the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are free will choices. And, I use the example, if someone is holding a weapon to my head and says, do what I say or bam, okay, I still have a choice. There was an example. Let me give an example. A few years ago, I'm not sure how many. It was probably maybe even 10 years ago now. I can't remember exactly when. 5 to 10 years ago, somewhere in there, probably. There actually was an atheist who was a student at a Christian university, And one day, I'm going to try and be very careful with my language so the algorithm doesn't.
Thank you. Thank you.
He brought a dangerous item into the classroom and began pointing it at people. And he asked them, "Are you a Christian?" The first person said yes. Bam. That person's no longer. Okay. The second person, "Are you a Christian?" And this was a Christian university. So, most of the people are obviously going to be Christian. Same thing. Bam. Third person. Bam. On down the line. Now, let's say you're the fifth person in the line and you just saw those other four people. You know what's going to happen to you if you say yeah. And this actually did happen. You go look this up.
I know this. I know this story. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're the fifth person in the line and you're a Christian. And you know that you can't deny Jesus. But at the same time, there's this person doing this. At the end of the day, what all these people did who were victims of this act, they all used their free will to basically, and they could have saved their lives if all they had said was no.
I am very familiar with this tragedy, and it was a tragedy, and some people did say no, and he shot them anyway. So
yeah, right, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's the point is that there were people who said yes, and knowing that this would have the outcome of them, first of all, dying, passing away very painfully, or maybe it wasn't too painful, but either way, they were going to lose their life. The point is that even when we're faced with so-called coercion or threats to our life, it's at the end of the day, yes, we still possess the choice. So yes, it does. And even if you want to, when you now going to the topic of hell, absolutely. The whole point, that's what God is trying to tell us. If you don't do these things, then you're going to go to hell. And people cannot like that all they want. But the thing is, what God is actually saying is you do have free will and you can use it however you want. I'm not going to force you to do this or that, but there's consequences to our choices, to your choices. And how you can live your life this way or that way, or reject me, or be evil, or whatever it is the bad things are. You can do that. You can live that way. That's your free will. But there's consequences to your free will. So absolutely, just because there are consequences to how we use our free will does not invalidate the idea that free will exists. So I'll just leave it there.
Well, I think this creates a lot of problems. And this is actually what I believe the church has done in order to try to make God not the bad guy, right? No. It's your choice to be the sinner or not, to engage in sin or to reject, quote unquote, reject God, even though, and that's another thing I want to get into before this wraps up is the belief itself, because you cannot control what you believe. I think I mentioned that before. I think you pushed back on that, but we'll get into that in a second. This creates a really ugly scenario. If we run your conclusion to its logical end, it creates some really, really fucked up ethics, in my opinion. Let's try to give an analogy without making it personal. So let's just say we have a person, a father. Okay, there's a father. We'll call him Bob, and he's got a daughter, and her name is Sue, right? And Sue goes out to the football game or whatever, and walking home from the football game, some asshole named Jack pulls up in his car, points a gun at Sue, and says, "You're going to, do sexual favors for me, or I'm going to shoot you." Well, Sue, fearing for her life, capitulates because her life is on the line, right? Now it's for her, according to this model you're presenting, that's Sue's fault. It's her free will choice. Too bad for the consequences. You chose to engage in this behavior. So how do we not blame Sue if it's her fault? At what point are we assigning blame? If we're not going to assign blame to God for punishing us with eternal torture, we're going to assign the sinner. How are we not then being logically consistent to blame Sue for giving up her body willfully, according to you? That seems so messed up. Can you see how just dysfunctional that becomes?
Well, it depends on what exactly God is asking us to do. I don't think, at least according to my understanding of Christianity, I mean, you can talk to other Christians, they might say differently. I don't think God is asking us to do anything immoral or questionable. In fact, I think that I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with evil people being punished with hell, and I'm not even personally sure that hell is eternal. But I do think whatever it is, it's really something you want to avoid, because it obviously involves a great deal of suffering. There's no doubt that people in hell suffer, and how exactly that's experienced is an open question. But um, I don't think that God's demands of us are unreasonable or yeah, if you don't, but when you look at what God has to do, if you don't do those things, then you're going to get punished. I don't see a problem with there being punishment for bad action. So in God's system, Jack would be the one being punished here. And
Yeah, but in okay, I you're saying, I understand what you're saying, that Jack is going to be the bad guy in God's system. However, the other bad guy is the person who just doesn't want to believe in this God, right? Doesn't want to follow what God says in, in the Mosaic Law or the Ten Commandments necessarily, right? Like it gets really, really dicey there. If God said, "Hey, I want you to go, genocide all the women and children, all the Amalekite women and children," you're like, "Hey, no, God, that's really messed up. I don't want to do that. That's going against God's will," which technically that's what sin's definition is. But let's just set all that aside for a second and just talk about the actual the issue of free will and how it plays a part here, irregardless of what the commands are. If the sinner is responsible because of their free will decision to avoid any negative consequence, right? Because they're just saying, "Well, listen, I just want to avoid the negative consequence, so I'll go ahead and follow God's rules." Or, "Listen, I don't want to follow God's rules, but I'm going to, I guess I already said this. So I'm going to follow, but I'm going to do it because I want to avoid the negative consequence." You're saying there is a negative consequence. We don't want to blame God for that threat, because it is actually a threat, this negative consequence, whether it's justified or not, right? So incarceration is a threat, right? We use that over people to say, "Hey, listen, don't be like Jack because we will lock your ass up," right? So we have a threat that we're saying, "Hey, look, Jack, if you violate this, right, this agreement here, we're going to lock you up." So how are you saying that it's Jack's fault instead of Jill's fault or Sue's fault or whatever the lady's name was supposed to be? Because she's the one who made a free will decision to do this. She has just as much responsibility ontologically, it would seem, as what Jack has, because they're both making their free will decisions. If coercion is not a factor, this is what they call victim blaming, and this is the road that it leads down. If you think that every decision is a free will decision, that coercion is not a factor, because if coercion is not a factor, threat of violence, threat of death is not a factor, then how do we assign blame to anything?
I'm not actually sure I'm following what the problem with. It sounds to me like here's the problem I'm having. It sounds to me like you have a problem with the idea of God basically demanding that we behave in a certain way or bad things will happen. Is that the ultimate problem here? I guess.
What I'm trying to do is map this onto free will. So if free will is independent, you're saying that we still have free will. We still have all the responsibility, the agency, this free will, even though there's this threat of serious harm or death on the table. It's still a free will decision. Coercion is not a factor for free will. And that's the justification that is used in religion. Is that free will is the issue.
I mean, even in our humanistic secular societies, there are punishments for bad acts. So let's take one let's just take stealing, for example. It's not controversial. If you steal someone, I don't think it's totally outside the bounds of ethics to say that a thief should be punished for stealing from somebody. Now, what should the punishment be? It should be something that is, commensurate with the crime. If you steal a candy bar from a store, you shouldn't be executed, and you shouldn't be sentenced to like in Les Miserables, the guy is sentenced to 20 years of prison for stealing a loaf of bread. Okay, but what if you steal what if you are a scammer and you steal someone's entire
life savings, I think we can probably agree that that person deserves a pretty serious punishment.
So I think most humans and people, rational people and ethical people, agree that punishment is a perfectly fine way of dealing with people violating, ethical norms. I don't see a problem with it, and it doesn't mean you're violating people's free will. You're simply saying, if you choose to do this, there will be a punishment. So that person still has the ability to do that thing, but other people have the ability to forcibly, inflict punishment on that person, and that's how they'll utilize their collective free will. And that's what society, that's what laws are. They're a collective direction of our collective. They're a direction of our collective free will. And part of utilizing our collective free will is imposing our free will on people who violate societal ethical norms. Every society does that. There's no way to avoid that. If you want a cohesive society, you need to punish evildoers. Otherwise, at least, according to my understanding of human nature, evil will run rampant. And I want to get into the ethics of this. That's exactly what a lot of politicians, I won't say which political party, but mostly one political party, they're soft on crime. Guess where the highest crime rates are? In those areas where those politicians run things. I don't want to get political parties going. I'm not here to do that. What I'm trying to say is where you have these people who have this mentality that criminals are victims of an oppressive system or capitalism or whatever system you want to talk about, and they treat criminals like that. Guess what? And that gives criminals free reign to do what they do. And guess what happens? That's exactly what they do. And it leads to suffering. And if those people aren't punished and isn't some sort of type of negative reinforcement for them, then it leads to chaos in society. So I think punishing people for wrongdoing is perfectly acceptable.
I agree 100%. I do. I think that punishment is acceptable and it's necessary because we want to deter bad behavior. So I'm completely on board with that. But I think that what we need, justice requires justification. Justification requires fairness, and that religion lacks that. It's othering certain groups of people, outing certain groups of people based on being God's chosen group of people, so on and so forth, or God, whatever, believers, non-believers, this and that, gays versus straights. I mean, there's all kinds of messed up othering that happens because of religion, and it's not justified at that point. But I agree that in a secular system, we can actually come up with justice because we could treat like cases alike. But you and I are going to have probably a fundamental difference there. That's something I'd like to maybe discuss. But I've dunked all over biblical morality in several debates already, and I'm getting ready to have one with Jill coming up in May, and I'll do the same thing again. Let's open up the panel to the audience, but I want to give you, I think we've pretty much hammered this down as much as we're going to be able to. I don't think there's any more common ground that we're going to find on this. I think that I'd like to give you a conclusion. I know I asked you already, has the needle moved for you at all? And you said no. I doubt that it has since that comment, just based on our discussion. So I'll give you a chance to kind of have a final, this is, just wrap up your position again, because people may not have seen the first two videos, so they can get a summary of this is why I believe what I believe. I'll go ahead and give my closing remark or whatever, and then I think we'll open up the panel, and I'll do that while you're making your final closing statement here on this particular topic, and maybe we can get into ethics on another conversation, because I think that is a conversation maybe we should have.
Yeah, what I would encourage people to do is, I think that this topic is extremely important, and it forms the basis of so much of how we view first our own capacity, our human potential, and also I think this was originally going to be a discussion about the intersection of ethics and the free will. And unfortunately, we only spent about 15 minutes of these last three discussions really diving into that in depth, which is sad, because your view on free will and the human capacity for free will, and to what extent we have free will affect your view of what framework society should adopt for people who use their free will, if they even have that, in ways that are contrary to ethical norms. That's once we've established what even is ethical, and whether objective ethics exists at all, So this is really an important topic, and it influences a lot of how we operate in this world. I really encourage people to go back and to listen to all the things that I said. I will fully admit that there are a lot of unanswered questions in the theoretical framework that I had put forward. The mind body problem, the mind body interaction problem. What exactly is the mind? What is consciousness? All of these things. But I think when you get to it, people, if they're objective and honest, this is probably my bias saying, I think they will recognize that my theoretical framework is a better explanation than the current so-called scientific materialistic explanation. And the reason that is because the scientific materialist explanation has severe limitations, which can't explain what's observed. First of all, the scientific materialist paradigm is entirely necessarily deterministic. The laws of physics can only do one thing. There can't be multiple potential possible outcomes according to the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry. These things are mathematically quantifiable. You can't go this way or that way. But we see in our everyday lives that we're making choices all the time where we have to go this way or that way. So at some point, it has to break down. Something's got to give. There must be a theoretical framework that is superior to the current framework that's been established by our so-called scientific community, and that has to incorporate a mind which is capable of directing the matter in our body. Remember, if matter is all there is, and our body that would include our bodies. Our body is only matter according to this framework. So our body is governed by the laws of nature as it directs matter. Well, we have to have a mind directing the matter of body to engage in goal-oriented behavior if that's the case. Otherwise, we'll just do our body won't behave any different than any other rock or a clump of dirt or puddle of water. We won't be able to do anything. We'll be a human body shaped rock or clump of matter that does nothing to engage in. Emergent properties don't solve the problem because the emergent property of the mind, it has no causal efficacy. It can't actually influence the matter in our body. So even if it does create a situation where a mind can exist, that mind can't do a feedback loop and influence the motion of our body. So the mind must necessarily exist as an independent agency, and it must necessarily have causal influential power over the body. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive as organisms. So I'll just leave it there. I laid out all my case for all that, and we will proceed forward.
That's a good summary of the first three discussions, A's. I really enjoyed having this with you. I think I'll probably reserve my closing remark for my final outro because I am running up against the clock myself. Actually, my wife just told me she wants to go buy a car today, so I definitely need to supervise that situation. But I do want to give the audience a chance to interact with us for a bit, and especially since you're here. So I've got Chris Moore has popped in. For everyone else, the link is pinned. If you want, I'll probably be on for another 45 minutes, and I'm going to hard stop it probably about there. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, you're welcome to join. Oh, very good. Robin's here. So Chris Moore, you were here first. We'll go to you. Then we're going to go to Robin. And go ahead and have the stage, Chris. Introduce yourself.
I need to run to the restroom for the next 2 minutes. I'll be right back. I don't know. Well, hold on. I'll hear that with this. I'll listen to what Chris and Robin have to say. Then I'll go. How about that? So that way, I want to know what they say. I want to know what their openings are.
Well, we can take a quick. You can take a quick break. I need to put some coffee in anyway. So let me give the floor. Actually, let me do this then. Let me have Robin run the show. Robin, you take the floor and tell everybody about your channel, what you've been discussing about religion and harm to women. Give a summary of that and get people interested in maybe going over and checking out what you're doing on your channel because it's been really good stuff. And I'll be right back. A's will be right back.
All right, everybody take a bathroom break. I'm Robin Webster. I have posted my channel in chat, but I will in a minute. Most of you probably know who I am anyway. I've been doing some content on the harm that the Abrahamic religions create to women, especially. And so if you don't, you can come and join in those conversations because we usually have an open panel. And tonight I am going to have a panel on voting rights, the attack on voting rights currently and going on in the United States. So I do get pretty political over there most of the time. So if you don't like politics, it's probably some of the conversations you might not want to be involved in. But I appreciate getting perspectives from everybody. So are you back, Oe? Or A? I think A's there. But anyway, so yeah, just and please subscribe. I've tried to post everybody's oh, you're Robin too. Okay, I missed it. I've tried to post everybody's channel in chat that I could find that had a channel. If I missed you, if you'll just let me know, I'll try to get you in there because I think I'm the only Tilton Windmill. It must be having a busy day today. They're not here, so and unfortunately, I'm modding on 2 channels currently, plus coming on this panel. So yeah. So I've got a little bit going on. I don't know. Oh, he's back here or not? I guess not. I'm about to run out of things to talk about. Like and subscribe to the video, please. It helps to get it out with the algorithm. And I just think OE is just I think this is a great space where we can all kind of have these discussions, even if we disagree. And I appreciate A coming on here today, or Anthony coming on here today and sharing his perspective on it. I probably disagree with much of what he has said, but I think it's cool that he comes in here and has these conversations. And thank you.
Thank you so much for I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, Robin. I just threw it in your lap. But you did a great job. I think hosting your own channel, you've got all the skills. You know how to fill the airtime. I was kind of listening as I was running around through the room, so trying to figure things out. So okay, I don't know if A's is back yet. I think Chris, were your comments going to be something kind of directed towards A's, or were they just comments on the topic in general?
Well, it's more of a well, just like notes. Essentially, commentary notes on what I've had like objections to. Not sure if it makes any sense, but here it goes.
Well, let's I think A's did want to hear this, and I also do.
Here, yeah, all right, yeah, it's fine. I'm back.
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead. Fire on.
Okay.
Fire away.
When it comes to A's arguments of free will, there's basically you can basically go throughout my comments on the side chat, but it's just basically that there's like a conflation or a attempt to essentially kind of like conflating mind consciousness into like the spirit, although as an atheist I don't really believe that much in like theist definition of spirit, but it's just to anyhow smuggle in those terminologies are basically kind of like put in vogue and really vague in order to smuggle in the supernatural elements of the conversation in pertaining free will. Okay, and that's point number 1. Point number 2, bacteria has a mind. Not really. It doesn't. It has instincts, and if you were want to stretch it, protocols. Reason why is basically it's because it has a symbiotic bacteria that lives in our bodies and essentially have a symbiotic relationship towards us as the superorganism, if you will, on that scale. And they do have functions and quote unquote purposes, but it's not like it's not like a thinking or it's not like a thinking as in like if it has. The way A's is kind of saying this, it's like it has saying that all our trillions of microorganisms that we have within us is sentient somehow, and it's not. It's basically based on chemical reactions, and just it's like a very basic yes or no, like multiple choice up to like 4 options of what it has to do. And yeah, and same with the thing with atoms is that they just have reactions, chemical reactions, and that's it. And my final point is that the last arg no, actually I have two. The fit like there's at one point that you're saying that that Ace is saying that physics is limits the like the is limits um the observation of the world or how the structure of his worldview, and he doesn't really abide by that because it feels it's limiting. Well, the only thing is that you have to kind of understand is that you're saying like you kind of well during that speech is basically you're saying that the awe and wonder that you experience as a theist is right to like you have to you're required to have awe and under and wonder like in the equation of the life of the universe, and it can only exist with if a you know if Deus exists, and that's it. But that's just like it's what I'm saying is it's a presupposition that you are imposing on the conversation because it otherwise to you it like to A's sorry it does like the whole equation doesn't compute. But you know it's but and as for us on the other side of the fence we beg to differ. And the other analogy that I didn't exactly like, it kind of pertains to the idea uh, of if are we like if we are and or like subplot of the conversation where upon the moralities and ethics. Um, in essence, I kind of found it pretty much demeaning. It essentially we are all cowards until we're proven otherwise. Essentially, so anyway, because you cannot measure if you are going to do this the same heroic action, quote unquote, over and over and over again, knowing the consequences, and yeah, so it's basically like Schrodinger's ideal of a cat in an idealistic form. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah, that's my final point.
Ace, did you want to respond to that since it was directed at you before we go to Robin?
Um, I guess there's so much there that it'd be hard to respond to it in a timely manner. So let's first hear what Robin has to say, and then we can kind of make progress after that.
Okay, that sounds good. Robin, did you? I know you had the stage for quite a while there. Did you have anything in particular since Ace is back? You want now that Ace is here? Did you want to?
No. I'm actually I'm trying to like multitask, and so like just go ahead. I wasn't gonna push too much on today because I got so much going on. So just go ahead and let him respond to Chris that way because I'm trying to do so much at once.
Fair enough. Just real quick, so everybody knows that there's a little maybe confusion in the chat. I've got a gentleman here who's also named Robin, so we have 2 Robins today. It seems like we usually have 2 Chris's, but today it's 2 Robins. And so Robin, I'm gonna for the gentleman. I met him over on DNW's channel. DNW does a great job with his show. Robin, very polite gentleman. I haven't spoken to him a lot, but he has a very unique economics model. He calls SPC the Social Prosperity. What the hell is it? Charter, Social Prosperity Charter. And I'm hoping to have Robin come on the channel as a guest speaker to talk about that. I know we haven't discussed a lot of politics and economics on this channel yet, a little bit, but it is a very interesting model, and it's very complex, though. It goes really deep. So today is not the day we're going to get into it, obviously, but I want to have Robin here as a guest speaker, and we're going to talk about that, get into it. He's been very kind to send me that written up so that I could dive into it. But so when you hear me say Robin, I'm going to be talking about the Robin we all know, and I think I'll try to refer to the gentleman as like Robin SPC or Robin number 2 or something like that. So to kind of help with confusion. So go ahead, A's, if you want to respond to Chris at all or what he said, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's a number of points there. He made a bunch of claims about how this is the way things operate, and that's just the way it is. It's all chemical necessity. Again, that's a lot of question begging. That's exactly what we're trying to determine. Yes, I agree that the current scientific paradigm is that when we observe whether it's these bacteria or more complex quote unquote organisms, at the end of the day, all of this, according to the scientific community, or most of the people within the scientific community, it has to be the result of chemicals operating according to the laws of physics. There's nothing else for them, because that's the quote unquote scientific paradigm. The thing you have to realize, that's a philosophical commitment. That's actually not a scientific observation. The idea that everything is the unfolding of the process of atoms and molecules moving through space. That's actually not quote unquote science. That is a philosophical commitment masquerading as a scientific perspective. Okay. So what people should really be doing is simply asking, well, what is true? Instead of trying to say, well, science, we're going to confine it to this narrow definition of we can only entertain things according to the idea that everything is matter and motion, and matter is the sole factor, and maybe energy, but it's all unguided. It's all just interacting according to these mathematically quantifiable forces of nature. That's a very poor explanatory model when we actually look at how we live our lives. If we
presupposition. I mean, so
okay, presupposition is a good word. It's a presupposition. It's not a scientific fact.
What I'm saying is that you are presuppositioning the fact that God or a creator needs to exist in all things and all of that, because otherwise it's like your own, not modus operandi, but it's just like your worldview kind of crumbles apart. But that's just
that's not correct. Presupposing would be saying I'm starting with God and fitting everything within that framework. I'm not.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Hold on, I know that's what you're accusing me of doing. Let me explain why that's not the case. What I'm doing is I am actually engaging in real science. I'm looking at the world in which we live. I'm looking at how it operates, and I'm saying what explanatory model best accounts for everything I'm observing. First of all, really, God hasn't really even entered in the equation yet. I think God does arise at some point and is part of an explanation but not for what we've been talking about. There's nothing I've said that requires a God at all, in my opinion. Now, a soul or a spirit, yes, but I think you can have a soul or a spirit without there being a so-called transcendent, omnipotent God. But I'm looking at the universe. I'm observing it. I'm seeing how it operates, and I'm saying, does the materialistic physicalist paradigm explain this according to the definitions that the scientists have given us?
If you're talking about a bacteria, yes, it does. Because
actually, no, it doesn't. Because you mentioned instincts. What are instincts? Please define instincts.
Protocols.
Where do they come? What are instincts? Where do they come from? How do they operate? Are they chemical processes? Are they atoms? Are they molecules? What are they?
Chemical processes.
They are not.
And directives to essentially keep yourself alive.
Instincts. Let me help you. Let me help you, Chris. Instincts are things that appear in the mind of various organisms that cannot be explained simply by chemical processes. Okay, so
your smuggling minds in the conversation.
Okay, where let's approach this from a physicalist model. How do instincts gain? What is the source what is the source of existence of instincts in the physicalist model? Where do they have their basis? In purely molecules and atoms. How does it work? Explain it to me.
Yeah,
all you have is atoms and molecules. Explain to me how
you have different parts of your brain that are assigned to different tasks. Different tasks to your body. That's for one thing, and then there's a subset of different parts of the body that are basically specialized in different tasks in order to keep you alive. Does that sound like, I know that this is basically like on a broader sense, but does that explanation?
Yeah, you made general claims. So you said there are parts of your brain that are assigned to different parts of your body. So when one example of an instinct,
different functions. Anyway,
okay. One good example of an instinct is when a gazelle is born on the Serengeti, and it immediately knows to run from the lion. Doesn't have to be taught. It just instantly starts running, and it just knows to run away from the source of danger. Many animals have different kinds of instincts. This is just one. So that's not a part of the animal's body. That's not a part of the brain that is, assigned to, the idea of
Do
running.
I need to think in order to breathe?
Yes, you do.
Nope, I don't need to.
Well, actually, you do because, but you do it at a subconscious level. So mind actually is under the control of breathing is actually under the control of the mind.
Moving the goalpost anyway, but that's not.
I'm still interested. How do atoms give rise to instincts? I'm flummoxed by this thought process.
Like I said, different parts of your brain are responsible for different tasks, and that's for one thing. And then within your body, like different organs have different tasks. That does that basically satisfy?
So to me, no, it doesn't, because to me, an instinct is thoughts that arise in a certain.
Okay, but we cannot go further because you're just basically like brushing it off. So
right, because this all goes back to how like a thought cannot be encapsulated or contained within a purely physicalist model. This is all I'm trying to get you to understand is when you talk about instincts, you're actually talking about thoughts. So what model best explains how the origin and source of thoughts? And I'm trying. All the questions are leading back to how do thoughts exist in a purely physicalist world? All you have is atoms and molecules, and you're saying that there are parts of the brain. Okay, well, what are parts of the brain? All you have is atoms in the shape of a brain. When I look under a microscope into the brain, where am I going to find the instinct, the thought, or any thought whatsoever?
I'm just saying that you're going to have an F in biology class, and that's it. Okay.
Let me explain something. I had the highest scores in my biology class of anybody. Okay. I know a lot about biology. So I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear ad hominems. I want to hear your explanations. You're claiming I'm making things up. I want to hear how your explanation is better. So far, you've given me nothing to work with. What you need to explain, Chris, is how any thought, because this is why I'm doing this. When you talked about the bacteria, and you said you're the one who brought
conscious and subconscious.
Let me finish.
Like freely, so it fits your definition of what it basically fits the dynamics of the conversation in your favor. So it's like like I said, you're just kind of moving the goalpost over here. And
all I'm asking for is your framework. I'm not even making an argument. I'm trying to ask you how your framework works in light of what you believe, and you're not doing a very good job of it. I hate to say it, you're just not.
You're just making claims. Oh, there's a part of the brain that's assigned to what is. That's a horrible explanation. How does it function? How does it work? If I was trying to engineer and replicate your model, if I wanted to build a little brain that actually functioned and worked in the real world, you just claiming that a brain does this doesn't help me. Okay? You have to explain how it all works, how it all functions. You've given me no scientific analysis. You haven't even given me the materialist neuroscientific perspective of how this all works. You don't even seem to know how that operates.
Okay. I think we're actually going nowhere with this OE, and I'm sorry if I basically just kind of dragged the conversation down.
No,
you haven't.
Not at all. Not at all. You didn't.
Chris, I just want to know how does your model actually work? How do atoms produce thoughts? That's all I'm asking you.
I wasn't exactly going to the when you said about the like bacteria and stuff. I wasn't going for I wasn't going for the like the consciousness like argument. I'm just telling you how I would
you told me I'm wrong. You told me my model is wrong because organisms have instincts and it's all chemical pathways and chemical interactions. Explain to me how it works. I'm just asking you to explain how your system works and my system is refuted. I don't understand why that's difficult.
It's just basically because you're like when you said that when I said that all the microbacteria and whatever that we have microorganisms that we have in our body is a not parasitic but symbiotic relationship. It's like you don't like it's just like what I'm saying is that the different levels of biology that is essentially regarded is that it's assigned to a specific task for that essentially amounts to like five different functions.
Okay, let me help you
like
out.
on each level, on each level, and that goes for the digestive system. It goes for the sorry.
All right, Chris, let me help you out. To refute my system, here's what you have to do. You have to show how pure matter can produce a mind or thought, a system whereby matter acting by itself can basically produce goal-oriented behavior in a way that a mind exists and produces a causal feedback loop that thereby the mind is produced by the matter, but the mind is also directing the motion of the matter itself, even though it's a product of the matter. So can you do that?
So you're telling me that basically need to have some form of intelligence to determine whether to eat an organism or leave it alone. Is that it?
What I need, Chris, for you to.
I'm asking you. Is that what you're asking me?
No. What I'm asking you is, I want you to explain to me in purely physicalist, materialist terms how the observation of free will, what we observe as free will, happens. Okay, you're making a claim that it's all chemical pathways, it's all chemical interactions, it's all brain chemistry. Okay, explain to me how that works. Explain to me how that works and how that accounts for what I'm observing as apparently free will.
Okay, so how does that work if you're saying how like it's just by chemical reactions and stuff like that? Just
because to me
in you. Okay, according to you, what happens?
in my framework, an independent mind at some point becomes necessary. So I want you to just explain to me
Yes,
how,
but
according
from
to
point A to point B, there's not a single thought of consciousness occurring. It's all subconscious and based on instinct and protocol to keep you alive. Okay? That's
I
what I'm
want to.
saying.
I want to
Anyway.
just really quick. I really love this back and forth. I think you guys are passionate, but also being very respectful, and I really appreciate that. But Simos is here, and I know Age, you are coming up against the clock at this point, and Simos is going to have probably some really intellectual things to offer this conversation. And I also want the audience to get a chance to see his interaction because we're trying to get Simos to 500 subs. So this is the gentleman that I was talking about. It's Simos Funk. I'll be sure to get his link posted in the description, along with Ace Philosophy, of course, so you guys can reach out to him directly through his channel. And other channel members who I see are in the chat. I see Dan Norton stop by. And just really quickly, if I forgot to say hello to anybody today, I try to do that, but I didn't mean to be rude. I was just really focused on the conversation with A's out of respect for the guest. So don't feel like you were intentionally ignored. And hello and thank you to everyone who supported the channel today. So many people did stop by. But Simos, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell people about your channel, and then whatever you have to offer to A's or the conversation.
Okay, yeah, look, I'm Simos. Sub to me if you want to. That would be great. I don't want to step on your toes, Chris. So if there's something you want to finish up with, then please do, and then I could talk after that. Because
I'm more frustrated with the fact that essentially, like the function and the governance of the brain that's either a conscious thought and a subconscious thought. And if it's a subconscious thought, it's essentially instincts and protocols of those stuff. But A doesn't really want to speak about that because I guess we kind of smuggled in free will conversation again. Anyway, so I'm almost tapped out. Sorry.
Okay,
So.
that's all right. That's all right. Hey, do you want to come back before I get in on it?
Well, he did respond to that. Go ahead.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, in which case, so the reason I came in is because you said, you had a theory that provided an answer for the hard problem of consciousness. Hey, is that right? Is that your claim?
I have a theoretical framework that I've explained. I would say, yeah, I'll put it that way.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, as from my particular point of view, as a physicalist, I also believe that there is an answer. I just don't have it, of course, because it's the hard problem. However, there are some good a posteriori reasons as to why we should believe that that question can be answered from the physicalist perspective, right? So there have been lots of neurology tests done to show that making physical changes to the brain does physically affect the way people think and their consciousness. So that the interaction problem seems to be more likely under physicalism than it does under some kind of soul-guided principle, where I don't think there's no evidence that anything abstract has causal powers, in which case that couldn't be affecting physical reality. But so what would you say to that, first of all? Let's go down that road.
Yeah, so we've done experiments showing that if we impact the brain, then the consciousness is influenced. That's totally fits within the framework of there being an independent mind, because you're actually not solving the problem, because that particular observation could fit within either framework just as easily. So I could say, well, the consciousness or the mind or whatever you want to call it is interacting with or connected to the brain, and thus is going to be influenced by whatever is happening in the brain. So in either framework, the observation could fit within it. So it's not what we call distinctive. There's no distinguish. Yeah. So it doesn't actually help either one of us to observe that. It doesn't prove anything. So I don't see how that invalidates anything I've said.
Yeah, well, I didn't say it did prove anything. I was very careful to separate myself from that position. However, my argument, I think, hang on a minute. However, it does, as an abductive argument, I think that the likelihood becomes higher when you consider that there could be a connection between physicality and the mind, right? That's what it demonstrates, that there is one there.
Okay.
But what it doesn't demonstrate, right, or as yet I've heard no argument which demonstrates that there is a connection between an abstract soul and the physicality of the brain. So that's what I'm looking for from you. I'm looking for something which solves the interaction problem.
Let me ask you this: do you believe humans and other organisms are capable of engaging in goal-oriented behavior?
I mean, as a phrase, yeah, as a semantic project, yes.
So when a magnet is drawn to, the north side of a magnet is drawn to the south pole of another magnet, is it engaging in goal-oriented behavior?
No.
Okay. So that's because it's all determined by laws of physics. So if everything in biology is a product of chemicals in our bodies, basically you can think of all the atoms in our bodies are essentially, they're magnets. There's the positive and there's the negative. Okay, and they're being drawn this way and that.
So not really, okay.
Yes,
there are other forces. There are other forces besides
what are they?
Electromagnetic.
Okay.
Well, there are other forces besides electromagnetic.
What are they then?
What are they? Nuclear weak and nuclear strong.
The four fundamental forces.
Right, right. So there are four fundamental forces of nature. None of them is goal oriented, though, is it?
That's a semantic game.
Yeah, I mean, so when you say goal, I mean, as humans,
if
I could just finish. As humans, we often talk about agency. We are endowed by evolution to view things through agency, and that naturally corresponds to goal-orientated phrasing. Right? It's almost impossible for us not to talk about it that way.
Right.
But that's not because it actually is. That's just because of our limitations of how we have to perceive and justify the thoughts that pop up into our consciousness.
Mm-hmm. So ontologically, there's no actual goal-oriented behavior in the universe, though, right?
Ontologically, I would say no. There's nothing which prescribes that we have to talk about it that way.
So ontologically,
other than complexity. Right?
Okay, so ontologically,
that's why we do it. Yeah,
so let me rephrase my original question. Ontologically, can humans and other organisms engage in goal-oriented behavior?
If we describe our behavior as goal-orientated, I don't want to say I'm not granting you.
I'm not asking how we describe it. I'm asking ontologically, can humans and other organisms engage in goal-oriented behavior?
But we can describe it that way, yes.
Okay, you're not answering my question. Again, I'm not asking how we describe it.
It's not a dodge, Ace. It's not a dodge. It's a different understanding. And there's an analogy that's commonly used for it. Imagine if you have an arrow that has thousands of different feather bristles that are bent in different ways. That's the orientation of the feather, in the same way that you might have an orientation of the consciousness. Now you drop this arrow, the orientation of that feather is in some sense its goal, if you want to call it that. They're analogous to one another. The orientation of that feather and the orientation of those neurons are determining what you call a goal. It's going to determine where that arrow in some sense wants to go.
Yeah, I have another way, right? It's just the difference between a nomenological explanation and an axiological explanation, and they're two valid explanations. So when you say, is there anything, or if I rephrase your question to say, is there anything in the universe which is necessarily can only have an axiological explanation? I'd say no. They can have, everything has two explanations. That's just the very nature of us as humans and how we perceive the world.
Well, how we perceive the world may say very little about how it actually operates, which I'm sure.
Exactly.
Okay, so what I'm saying is when we try to understand how the universe actually operates according to the materialist paradigm, it does not allow for real goal-oriented behavior. Okay, and that's a huge problem because goal-oriented behavior is all we observe in biology.
No, it's not true. Okay, so let me just give you another explanation or another way of looking at it, which might help. Okay, so when I see somebody running, right? In this example, right? This is a hypothetical. So I see someone running down the road. Now I could explain, right, them running down the road in purely physiological terms, right? I could say, okay, well, they have a nervous system which has been evolved, and I could go through the explanation of how that exactly came about. Then I could explain what muscles are and how they work, right? And then I could explain about the contractions of muscles in a particular way over a particular time frame in these particular bone structures which are attached to them, etc., etc. And that's a very complex way of describing someone running down the road, right? Or I could just say there's somebody running for a bus. Right now, they're both equally true, right? I could just go on and describe what a bus is, and in a very physiological way, and there's there's no difference in those two explanations, other than one is extremely complex, it takes a long time to say, right? And because we're humans, we have a common shared shorthand in the language, which allows me just to say something very simple, right? And that's it. Those are the difference between, as far as I can see, between a goal-orientated explanation and a scientific or physicalist explanation.
Right. So to me, the difference is
either wrong. Is the question to you?
Well, I don't think that either is getting to the source of the problem with the explanation of what's going on. I think that I think what skeptics, materialists are trying to do is escape the problem that is caused by observations with this cloudiness of the complexity of things. But to me, no matter how much complexity you add, at no point do you get a system that is capable of engaging in goal-oriented behavior, because it's all.
What is a goal?
A goal is basically it's an objective that you have out of a number of competing possible options. You have to choose the right option.
What makes you choose it?
What makes you choose it is your understanding of what is in your best interest. Okay, so
what makes that?
What makes that is your mind's assessment of reality. So
is there a neurological configuration that is determining that, or a neurological firing sequence that brings about the thoughts?
No, there isn't, because you would have to argue that you have to argue that a particular brain configuration at a specific point in time, you have to realize that if these thoughts, they're the result of chemical necessity too. Okay. And it'd be a pretty extreme coincidence for the chemical product of our brains to be exactly what it needs to be at the right time and place for us to make the right goal-oriented decision at a moment in time, when the laws of physics that determine
I'm so sorry to do this because it's a great conversation, but somebody is there's a lot of noise coming from somebody's microphone. I don't know if you're not talking. Yeah, I'm not sure who it is. Just anybody who's not speaking, please mute, and as soon as you have something to say, unmute yourself. Go ahead, Ace. I'm so sorry to interrupt. You're on a roll there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, remember, the laws of physics that govern what thoughts would arise were, according to the materialist paradigm, there long before any brain actually, quote unquote, evolved, which I don't believe in evolution, so I don't accept that. But even within that framework, it doesn't make sense. It's extremely problematic to say that these thoughts, the chemical necessary thoughts in our brain would match exactly what we would need to do in that moment at that specific time and circumstance. The unlikelihood of that being the case is beyond calculation. So I can't subscribe to that view.
Okay, so a couple of things here. Firstly, you didn't answer my question as to whether either of those descriptions, nomological or axiological, are wrong. And I think you'd have a hard job. Secondly, you didn't really answer about the interaction problem of how something immaterial can affect something material. That seems the philosophical difficulty in your position. And then thirdly, not accepting evolution. Okay, I mean, okay, but I don't know what to say about that exactly. It seems it seems to stretch that you can deny the scientific process when sitting on the internet and talking through it. I don't know.
I've studied the concept of evolution very deeply, and I know it's basically mathematically impossible. So that's why I don't subscribe to it. It's not that I just read a book, the Bible.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I would doubt your mathematical prowess then,
Okay,
because
well, what are they? What are my mathematical calculations?
I would doubt it. I said I didn't say that.
You don't know what they are, so how can you know what to doubt?
Because I doubt them because of your statement that it's basically mathematically impossible.
Well, you don't know what. Well, you have to. What are the mathematical quantum probabilities, and why should I believe that they can be overcome by evolution?
Right, because it's an observed science. I mean,
Oh, we observed evolving from an amoeba over billions of years. We observed that.
we observed the process of evolution. Yes, it has been.
Okay.
Observed.
Well, what have we observed exactly?
I'm not a biologist, so I can't go into
Okay.
details.
I'm not
here.
either, but I can step in and
but-
still tell you many
Either.
things
Hang on
that
a
we've
minute. Hang on a
observed.
minute. Let's. I don't want to go down that route because it's just not important. That's all.
Okay.
What I'm
okay.
doubting about what you said is that you have mathematical calculus. All right, you've made mathematical calculations which show it's impossible.
All right. Do you know what
the same.
acid is?
Say again.
Do you know what an amino acid is?
I've heard of it. Yes.
What is it?
It's a molecule.
What does it do in our body?
Yeah, like I just said, I'm not a biologist.
You
so
don't
it's
even know what an amino acid is. You're going to tell me you don't know the probability? Okay.
So if you want to go down the philosophical route, I'm happy to do that. Right?
All right, let me explain this to you. The mathematics. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but I can't give you like the ins and outs of how everything works in the body. I'm not prepared to do that.
Yeah, you can't even tell me what an amino acid is. That's pretty bad. I mean, that's actually like
hold on.
I did say it was a molecule, so I don't know.
Yeah, let's not start attacking people. Maybe
well, here's the thing.
So what I'm doubting is the prowess of your mathematical
okay, well, here's the thing.
calculations to show that that something is statistically unlikely is necessarily not impossible, is impossible, right?
Well,
that's what I'm doubting. So that's not a philosophical position.
I understand. Let me explain why you have a really huge problem on your hands. Amino acids are the building blocks of what are called proteins. Okay, proteins are coded for by our DNA. And then what the DNA does is there are sections of our DNA called codons. What they code for is the amino acid sequences in our proteins. And there are 20 amino acids used in life. And proteins can range from several, like a few dozen amino acids to
a couple of hundred, say, yeah,
to several thousand, right? And they have
to on average, say,
right. So the sequences have to be extremely specific too. So scientists know this, that even in some cases, some individual point mutations can destroy a protein that's thousands of amino acids long. Not always. Sometimes there's just degradation in the quality, its ability to basically perform its function. But in some cases, some extreme cases, even single point mutations can cause horrible defects. Like amino acid is one. What's that? Blood disease. Not hemophilia, but sickle cell anemia is, I think, a single point mutation in hemoglobin. Things like this. So you have to, basically the DNA has to find these extremely specific sequences out of a sequence space of numbers that we don't even have names for them because they're so big. All right. And you only have a certain amount of time and trials in the history of life on Earth. And when you crunch all the numbers, what you find is that even with trillions and trillions of years, not even a single amino acid would be found in the entire history of this span of life on Earth. So this is the problem that you're facing, Simon.
Well, that's your claim. I understand that.
Claim.
All right, so maybe you can study that and explain to me why I'm wrong in another conversation. But
maybe we can have a biologist do that.
Like I said, I'm not a biologist, but what I am is somebody that knows a little bit of maths, not very much, but just a little bit. And your claim is that something is statistically unlikely. It's impossible.
Well, you've given me no reason to doubt what I believe, so maybe that'll be in a future conversation.
Well, I'm just giving you a reason.
Ace did say he's got a hard stop, and we're past that. And I actually do have an obligation, a family obligation as well, that my wife needs some help with. So since Ace has to take off immediately, and let me just give Ace if one final opportunity at a closing remark. Try to keep it brief. I know he already kind of made his remark on the conversation, but just
I'll make it really quick. First of all, I apologize if I came across as confrontational. I really appreciated Simus. I apologize. Sometimes I do interrupt a little bit. That was inappropriate. But I do appreciate the engagement. I actually wish there was more of it. I wish we had more time. But I just want to say I'm really I'm thankful that Daniel has invited me on his channel. He's considered me worthy of bringing on his channel to discuss these ideas at all. I have to appreciate that, and I respect that. And actually, maybe this particular line of conversation has reached its terminus. But if you want me back, or if there's other conversation in the future, I'm absolutely willing to come back, even as a panel participant in other invitees conversations. So first of all, just thank you so much. Everyone go back, listen to the other conversations. I think they're interesting, and I hope to talk to you all again. Thank you.
Yeah, Ace, it's always a pleasure to have you stop by. To any of the guest speakers I have, even though a lot of times I'll invite a guest who I might have a fundamental disagreement with, the whole purpose of the channel is to encourage people to have these conversations, to kind of get into the weeds of these things, to learn how to do it respectfully and with intellectual integrity and honesty. And I think that we were all doing that today. And I don't think, even though it kind of a little bit got heated at the end there, I think ultimately passions are going to run high in a lot of these topics. And so that's perfectly understandable. And I appreciate you guys kind of keeping yourselves under control and being respectful. We are going to get into evolution next week with Austin. He is a biologist, and so a biology major. And so I think that that'll be a really great time to have you stop by, Ace, if you're available, and try to push back on some of the stuff that Austin has. He will have better information, I think, for that. And I do appreciate Simos his integrity that he showed in his humility by just announcing that, hey, I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to try and gaslight you here with a bunch of bullshit, because we see that happen far too much, right? People trying to these armchair philosophers or armchair, biologists or whatever. And perhaps I'm guilty of doing that myself. I probably get out over my skis a little bit too much sometimes. So I really respect Simos as being honest and being humble there and saying, this is what I can and can't address. And that helps Ace be able to couch his questions and his line of questioning appropriately, because otherwise Ace is just going to be talking past Simos and vice versa. So I think that was a really great example. So let me go ahead.
Can I say thank you to Ace for the short conversation we had? There are many areas I'd love to talk to you about. I think I was trying to head down to the dualism path myself, which I expect you've got some knowledge about, and perhaps you are a dualist. I don't know. I assume you are. But maybe we can talk again sometime. And
I hope so, Simon. Yeah, I know I got a little bit rambunctious.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
I appreciated the engagement very much.
Yeah, if we don't interrupt each other from time to time, the conversation can quickly go offline to somewhere where it's just pointless. So no, you're always fine to interrupt me when it's something pertinent. That's for sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to drop out, but I hope to talk to y'all later. So thank you so much again. Bye.
You're always welcome to stop by anytime, Ace. You know that. Okay. So, Robert, I'm going to let you have any kind of closing comments or whatever. And then I want Simos to have the final word here, because I want to give him a chance to plug again his channel. He's so close to 500 subs. So Robert, you go ahead and go next. And then we'll have Simos give his.
Hey man, I just wanted to stop by and, say, hey, primarily it'd been brought to my attention, and I'm sorry I did move my show, and it kind of steps on your show a bit, and it was not my intention to do so. I can't do the Saturday thing anymore. It's more of a family convenience to move it to the Sunday, but I took no thought of, and I had no intention of stepping on your show with mine. I know we have some of the same folks that like to hang out, but I always try to stop by here and give support, and I've mentioned you many times over there. So I think you're doing some good work here. Obviously, we have some disagreements on a few things, but that's the spice of life, as they say. So I enjoy. I'm Robert from Skeptic Philosophy, and y'all can always check me out. We do the show now every Sunday. Unfortunately, I hate to even advertise on this channel now because I'm stepping on your show a little bit.
Well, no, that's all right. That shows a lot of integrity also, Robert, speaking of that, because yeah, it does create a kind of a traffic jam at this time slot, but there's so many channels, we're in a actually pretty big community, and there's only so many days of the week and so many hours of the day. So I appreciate that you observed that and you mentioned it. And I do encourage people, if you want to check out Robert's show, it is happening at the same time, but he does a really good job. He gets into philosophy and really does hammer down on a lot of religion and stuff like that. So if that's something you want to do, check out his channel, maybe catch my video, not live but later on. I'm always grateful for any support, but yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that, Robert. That's very kind of you, sir. And I have mentioned you as well several times and plugged your channel as well, so there's no hard feelings whatsoever. That's very, very generous of you to say that.
Thank you, man.
Simos, I'm going to give you the floor to just let people know, put some peer pressure on them, tell them to come sub to your channel. You're going to come find them, however you do that,
I'm not. Look, guys, please come and sub to me. I may not have a lot of content which I put up these days, but you will find some old content on philosophical subjects. There's I have a playlist called The State of the Onion is what I called the series. And that's mostly philosophical topics, although there is a few other things mixed in. There's apologetics, there's is maths discovered or invented, that kind of thing, or AI stuff. Oh, there's all sorts of little interesting bits and pieces in there. It was an open panel show. I hope to restart it at some point and do some more. But it's just an open panel talking on any particular topic which I managed to come up with that week. So if you're into philosophy or those kind of podcasts, why not waste some time listening to mine? And you can go into the playlist and just look down. I've given them all silly names, but pretty much, I'm talking about stuff, right? What a couple of them are, what have the Romans ever done for us? Is there too much on the plate of Platonism, which I thought was a nice one. Many more besides. If we talk about Noah's flood, just every week it's all different. So go and have a look at that playlist. If there's any titles you think, oh, that might be interesting, please sub to the channel, hit likes and all the rest of the good stuff. And as always, thank you, OE, for having me on, and thank you for letting me engage. Yeah, I wish I could have had more time with A's because I know he's a very smart guy, and it would have been fine to have an interesting conversation on what is a very tricky topic. So never mind, maybe another time. We'll see how we're going.
Yeah, that was a really great back and forth that you guys were having, actually. And it is unfortunate that I had to shut it down, but Ace did tell me he had a hard stop, and that's just sometimes the way it goes. But I think, I could probably try and set something up between the two of you, because I think that was a really interesting and informative, excuse me, got the hiccups, interesting and informative conversation. I think that you do such a great job of keeping things as simple as possible so that idiots like myself can follow along. I really do respect that. I think it was Einstein, or I can't remember who said, probably it's been said many times. That
Einstein, yeah.
If you can't say something in simple terms, then you don't know what you're talking about, right? So essentially,
similar. Yeah. If you can't explain something to a child, then it's probably you can't explain it to anybody else.
Right.
But
exactly.
Something like that. I don't know. But like the reason I keep it simple is because I'm simple. So yeah, there you go. And that can be me being a little naive sometimes, and that's why I like talking to people like A's, because he pushes at that door.
Yes, exactly. I do really appreciate A's and I. Yeah, Ace and I have fundamental disagreements on a lot of issues, obviously, but we do share that common ground, and that respect is paramount. We have mutual respect for each other, and you could tell in our relationship, despite our differences, we're able to engage and looking forward to the next engagement. So that's really, I think, what I'm trying to promote with this channel is figuring out a way to find that common ground with people, and it usually comes down to just humanism, right? We're all human beings, and we all have the same basic needs. Oh, very good. All right. Well, I will go ahead and give some closing remarks. It's always great to have you stop by and support my efforts here, Simos. I've really been a fan of yours ever since I ran into you, and I think it was Captive Desk, probably the first time I saw you. I think it was Skeptic Philosophy, first place I saw him as well. And I've just really enjoyed your guys' comments and stuff like that. So to be doing my own channel at this point and have you guys come here and support me is really flattering, to be honest with you. I'm really grateful for that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And I'll catch up with you later. Take care now.
All right, brother. Very good. I see some new names popped up in the chat, and I didn't want to ignore you guys, but I didn't want to cut in the conversation. Where did I see Marty McFizzle? I know you said you had something you wanted to share, and I'm always interested in having people participate, but we're up against the clock. I'm actually 15 minutes behind now. So today's just isn't the day to do it. Every Sunday, as people probably know by now, I host an open panel. The show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern. And I oftentimes will have a guest speaker like I did today, but once the guest speaker and I have a chance to have a conversation, usually I try to keep that to 90 minutes or less. And then I open up the panel to everybody to join, just like we did today. It's a very typical format for me. I used to do more just open panel shows entirely, but I've had so many people who've reached out to me that want to be a guest speaker to offer a presentation about something. We had Robin number 2, I'm going to call him now, here in the chat earlier, and he has a economics model. And it's a very interesting model. If you're into economics and politics, I really encourage you to stay tuned because I'm trying to set something up with that brother. It has been people, when I ran into him on another channel, DNW's, and he was talking about his economics model, a lot of people thought it was communism or socialism. And he pushed back and said, no, this is completely unique. And so I think for the politically minded, economically minded people in my community, you'll find that conversation to be fascinating. But I'm booked all the way out through June because I have so many people coming up. Next week is going to be Austin. I think that's the last Sunday of this month, if I remember right. And then that means the next Sunday is going to be the first Sunday of next month, which we have a regular show I do with Johnny B. And we talk about failed prophecies. I think he wants to mix it up a little bit next time and do contradictions that we find in the Bible. And obviously there's so many of them, we're not going to get through all of them in one show, but yeah, he's going to go through a list of biblical contradictions next Sunday, just to kind of mix it up a little bit on that format. So I'm looking forward to having him. I've got LA Life Abolitionist coming up on the 10th. That's going to be a really great talk. I purchased his book, Whose Life Is It Anyways? And we'll be discussing, doing a bit of a book review, kind of talking about his position, which is antinatalism. So if you're interested in that topic, the fundamental claim from the antinatalist is that it's fundamental. It is at a fundamental level, it is unethical to bring children into the world, right? And so that's quite a bold claim. So if you're into that topic, please do come by and check out that show as well. And let's see, I've got another big name coming up that I'm really excited about. This Wednesday, I'm going to do a show with Khalid. We're talking about Is the West Lost and Dying? So that'll be a bonus episode. And I've got another gentleman who invited me onto his channel who's come by here. He goes by Max Doubt, but that's not the name of his channel, and I can't recall the name of it right now, but I'll probably dual stream that if he's on StreamYard, and if not, I'll just replay it on my own channel, maybe on a Saturday for a bonus episode or something like that. But I am going to get out of here. I just want you guys to remember the keys to what it is I'm trying to do here, which, it's respect for the planet, right? The environment, mutual respect, and self-respect. These are the bricks that we use to pave the road to the good life that we all want to live. Okay, remember that.
Channel 3.30 repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before. And Deacon Brandon, what do you do? state objective ethics will be on your plate.